Hello, both sides of the conversation family. We welcome you to this virtual space crafted especially for you. My name is Jada Curry, and I'm both sides of the conversation's marketing director and graphics design specialist. I want to take some time to ground us all as a community into this space we are about to open up in, so let's go through our community standards. Both sides of the conversation is providing a safe and honest space for open conversation, so we ask that you all be respectful of that. We also ask that you be respectful of each panelist, host, and participant. We do encourage healthy debates and conversations. Don't personalize anything with anyone. This includes name-calling, bullying, trolling, or shaming. This will not be allowed or tolerated. Your perspective is yours. It is not a prescription. You do not have to agree, but show respect. These community standards apply to all of our live shows and any virtual spaces that we hold on social media, including YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. We want to make sure that we are caring for each other as a community. This is our priority in all of our endeavors as both sides of the conversation. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed today's show and continue to stay in touch with us via YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or all of them. All right, thank you for listening and see you soon.
Welcome everybody to both sides of the conversation. Today is our Sunday conversation. Every Sunday at 2 p.m. we gather in this virtual space to have important conversations that impact our community. Today we're going to have another epic conversation with our Black educators. Looking forward to this conversation today. Before I get started, I want to say a couple of things to community. One, I know here in the Bay Area we're having a little raindrop, but it's not going to be enough rain to significantly impact us to get out of this water shortage that we have. So we're going to continue to remind community, do your best in solidarity to try to cut back and conserve water, taking less shower times, bathing times, and whenever we're running water, especially in our lawns, because this summer we will be impacted with the drought, and we don't want to have water outages impacting our community as we have elders and different people in the community that need those needs. And like we have rolling blackouts with our power, we don't want rolling blackouts with our water. So be mindful of that. We got to stand in solidarity with that, everybody here in California. And then I'm going to jump into one other thing. We are still in COVID. I went to a lot of community events out there yesterday. I see some people are getting relaxed. I know a lot of people are getting vaccination, but we are still in this pandemic, and we need to respect the 6 feet distancing and wear masks at all time because this thing is still out there and the cases are still rising a little bit, and we want to make sure that we protect our community and being safe. So just wanted to throw that out there to the community, and thank all of the community events that I was able to get out to yesterday. Phenomenal events. Just nice to see community trying to come together, trying to do things to stop the violence in our community, and working with our young people and trying to do some of the things of that nature. And I want to give a special shout out to Dr. Saturo over at the Black Panther Legacy Keepers. Had a phenomenal conversation with him, and I'm just loving to see some of the things that the Panthers are doing. And I'm just glad both sides of the conversation have an opportunity to come use some of these tools that can help impact our community in the future. So excited about that. And then to my brother Rob Newt out there, Black Man Enhanced, doing his thing for the community. Just wanted to say a shout out to him because, again, it takes Black males to step up and help make this change in our community. So nice just to see another good brother out here trying to do something to impact our community, which we know is needed with all the violence and things that are taking place in our community. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump into today's conversation. We are talking about the opportunity gap among our Black educators and students in our schools. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Miss Asia. Glad to have you back. Glad to see you. And Mr. Tachelle, we can start introducing today's panelists.
Well, it's good to be seen, and welcome everyone to both sides of the conversation. Let's read some of our bios for the day. Dr. Chike Akua. Dr. Chike Akua is a professor of educational leadership at Clark Atlanta University and one of the most sought after speakers at colleges, universities, and educational conferences nationally. He is a leading authority on increasing the achievement of students, especially those of the most challenging schools, and communities. His book, Education for Transformation, is a favorite among teachers and leaders. Dr. Akua has over 25 years of combination experience in education as a public school teacher, curriculum developer, professional development provider, leadership consultant, policy analyst, and university professor. He was selected Teacher of the Year for Newport News Public Schools, as well as ABEN magazine's 50 Leaders of Tomorrow. As a Black educator, he is deeply committed to culturally relevant, pugnant, and development of cultural relevant instructional materials. He has helped lead over 1,000 students and parents on trips throughout Egypt, Ghana, Morocco, and Senegal through the African Genesis Institute's Teen Summit program. Dr. Akua is a legend who is frequently called upon by education, civic, and social organizations to speak about educational excellence and culture knowledge. Our next presenter will be Micheal Essien. Micheal Essien is an educational leader with approximately 2 decades of public education experience working in Oakland and San Francisco Unified School Districts. Currently, he is a middle school principal in the greater San Francisco Bay Area. He has received his master's in education from UC Berkeley, principal leadership with a focus on equality and social justice. Micheal completed the National Institute of School Leadership Executive Development Program, was a nationally equality project fellow and Stanford fellow. He believes in community schools, project-based learning, restorative practices, and strategic thinking. His accomplishments are in organizational change, transforming professional learning communities, and empowering students, families, and teachers in public education. Mr. Essien is an equality leader, strategic thinker. He is known best for unpacking, implement bias and systems of oppression to improve outcomes for underserved students. Will Paris is another one of our presenters today. Will Paris is a 19-year educator and youth developer. He holds a Master's of Arts in Community-Based Education from the University of Michigan, Dearborn, and a Bachelor's of Arts in Urban Issues in Education from the University at Buffalo. Born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, Will spent 10 years in San Francisco working to support education reform and positive student outcomes for Black and Brown students. He was the program coordinator for 100% College Prep and program director for Young Community Developers in San Francisco. Will is currently a dean of students at River Heights Academy in Flat Rock, Michigan. Our next presenter today is Debra Watkins. Debra Watkins spent 37 years in the East Side Union High School District in San Jose, California, as a teacher, counselor, and project manager before retiring in 2012. During that time period, she was a founding member of the Santa Clara County Alliance of Black Educators and served as president from 1994 through 2001. In 2001, she founded the California Alliance of African American Educators and the Dr. Frank S. Green Scholars Program, named after an African American scientist who helped pave the way for today's computers. The GSP stands 100% since 100% of its students to college, 90% graduate in 4 years with a BA or BS degree, and 60% of those are in STEM, which is about 8 times the national average for Black students. In 2015, she was one of the founders of the Black Students of California United. In 2017, Debra founded and served as director of the Black Education Network, ABEN. She currently serves as the interim executive director while conducting a national search for her successor. Welcome. Our next presenter, Tyson Amir. Born and bred in the Bay Area, is the creative Tyson Amir. He is a rapper, blessed with a pungent message, electrifying cadence, enlightening lyrics, and it all combines to form a music with enough heart and soul to move a generation. Tyson is also a poet, MC, educator, author, activist. But if you ask him, he'll say he's a freedom fighter. His fight is born out of the love for humanity, justice, and peace for all. Each one of these layers are woven into his proxy and practice. Welcome. Now, let me introduce Miss Tachelle. Tachelle was born and raised in San Francisco, California, in the Bay Hunters Point. She is a first-generation college student and a third-generation Black educator, having graduated with a master's in art, inequality, and social justice in education from San Francisco State University. Tachelle has taught and written curriculum for ethnic studies, world history, and American history in the Unified School District for over 15 years. Currently, Tachelle is the Associate Director for 100% College Prep in association with Young Community Developers in San Francisco, California. She loves to assist students transition through school, earn transferable college credits, and secure scholarships. Tachelle is also a college lecturer for SF State Step to College, as well as a coordinator for historical Black college tours. Her goal in her community is to increase literacy rates and establish her own school. Welcome, Tachelle. Our next presenter today is Tafira Manning, born in California and raised in San Francisco. Tafira Manning has worked in education for over 20 years. Through years of dedication, Ms. Manning earned her Bachelor's of Art degree in Ethnic Studies and a Master's of Art in Education, focusing on instructional technology. While earning her degrees at San Francisco State University and being displaced from the Bayview by gentrification, Ms. Manning continued to serve the youth in her community through organizations. Ms. Manning is mother of 2 boys, an educator and instructional designer, currently teaching kindergarten in San Francisco. Welcome. Our next presenter, Charmaine Seaford, as a high school humanities and ELA teacher with the ACT project at Downtown High School. She teaches and aids students to empower themselves through writing in class using the knowledge accumulated over the course of a semester. She also teaches STEP at DHS and Lowell High School. How she describes herself as fearless, loving, and definitely bold with her laughter and love for her people. Originally from Washington, D.C., she aspires to serve the community and youth of San Francisco with everything she has. This has been her second home for the past 6 years and has seen the unfortunate dissemination of Black and people of color communities in the city. And the best way to hold this is with the youth. Her hope is to restore hope to those communities and to get to and they to thrive and not just survive. When she's not teaching, she is living her best life and fullest life. That looks like hiking, traveling, dancing, spreading love and joy, and seeking all kinds of thrills. And most importantly, being intentionally about loving herself. We must preserve ourselves at all costs, serve those that are in any type of need, and remember that the world is waiting for us. And those are some of our wonderful presenters today on both sides of the conversation.
I would
Thank
like
you,
Sherry Taylor. I'm sorry. May I present Sherry?
She already did.
No, Sherry just joined. Sherry Taylor is a wonderful teacher with years of experience. I had the pleasure of working with her at the infamous Willie L. Brown Middle School, where she transitioned not one, but 12 young, bright Black boys into high school. They are now phenomenal seniors and juniors. Sherry has worked throughout the district during this pandemic, before this pandemic, and she is here today to tell us how she does it. Thank you, Sherry, for joining us.
All right, all right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for Asia jumping in last minute. I know it was a struggle getting through, but thank you for stepping up. And also, I want to say, to the point of 100% college prep, I want to thank Diane Gray for the community PPE kits that we was able to get out to the community. I want to make sure I acknowledge 100% college prep for doing that for community yesterday. With that being said, I think we're going to go ahead and jump into this conversation. I know we have a full panel today, but I know we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to turn it over to Micheal to get the party started.
Thank you very much, John, and thank you for delivering the PPE for us yesterday in the community at Gilman Park with, was it Black Wall Street? I wasn't there. I was working.
No, Black Men in Hands.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, let's get started. Thank you, you brilliant Black educators. It is great to see you all. Have not seen you in a year and a half. So here is the first question. What is the opportunity gap for Black students? What does it mean? And what are the effects that you see in the classroom? Dr. Akua, can you please share your insight?
You got to unmute, Doc.
Did you want me to start with my presentation first or answer that question?
Yeah.
You may start with your presentation that I know will answer that question.
Sure. Okay. So actually, before we talk about any gaps, we need to look at who our children really are. And that's what I want to deal with first. So can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I like to begin with our initial premise. Before we talk about any gaps, before we talk about any deficiencies or anything, my initial premise and my initial understanding, and I find this to be true of all master teachers and leaders, is that our children are chosen. I believe our children are chosen for three things: greatness, excellence, and achievement. Again, greatness, excellence, and achievement. But we live in a nation that seems to have chosen them for something else. We live in a nation where we constantly see gangsterized and criminalized images of our young Black males, and we see hypersexualized images of our young Black females, where they're objectified and shown as objects of sexual pleasure rather than subjects worthy of dignity and respect. So when you ask about the opportunity gap, I'm glad that you at least use that terminology, because some people are still stuck on the so-called achievement gap. And the so-called achievement gap is supposedly the difference in achievement between Black students and white students, which is a false gap to begin with, because if the student achievement of white students is mediocre at best, then we're not trying to get to mediocrity. We're trying to get to mastery. And so when we talk about the opportunity gap, that lends credit to the fact that Black children oftentimes don't have the opportunity to go to schools that are properly funded, don't have access to schools where there are highly qualified teachers that are certified in the core content areas of science, social studies, mathematics, or language arts or reading. And so this opportunity gap is very, very real and is pervasive, particularly in schools where Black children predominate. Okay. And that's why I like to talk about what I call education for transformation. Education for transformation is the process of recapturing and practicing the ancient African and African American tradition of educational excellence, recapturing and practicing the ancient African and African American tradition of educational excellence. But here's one of the problems. So many people are unaware that this tradition even exists. And it is literally the oldest tradition in the world, going back thousands and thousands of years. And then it took place on these shores as well with African American teachers and leaders. So we want to resituate the conversation and center ourselves in the best of our culture rather than being so influenced by alien cultures. And this is why one of the things that I've said for years now is that culture is the key, the critical mediating factor in increasing engagement and achievement among African American students. Culture is the key. And the reason that this is the critical mediating factor in increasing engagement and achievement amongst Black students, I found in my own personal practice as a former middle school language arts and reading teacher, that when I infused the best of our culture into the curriculum, into the delivery of instruction, I literally had students who went from F's to A's. They had struggled in language arts and reading in previous years and in previous semesters. But when they got to my class, they were able to be successful because I taught them who they are, whose they are, where they come from, and where they're going, and centered and situated all of our discourse, all of our lessons in that knowledge base. Okay. And so what we're faced with today, when we talk about these gaps, you have some teachers who are conscious of these different things that I've been talking about. On the one hand, you have cultural consciousness, and that's the mindset. But on the other hand, you have cultural competence. That's the skill set. One more time, consciousness is the mindset. Competence is the skill set. I've met many teachers who have the consciousness, but unfortunately don't have the competence to teach the reading, the writing, the mathematics, the science, and so forth. And then I've met some who have the competence to teach the science, the social studies, the language arts, and the reading and writing and so forth, but they lack the cultural consciousness to embed and infuse that into the curriculum. And so their children may be able to score high on tests, but they don't know who they are and where they come from. And so all of this in the midst of a rising tide of schools that are underfunded, underserved, and underachievement. And what we have found is that it's the methods and materials that we use that bridge the gap, that can carry our children safely over. And so, again, I want to acknowledge, first of all of the wonderful educators that are going to be guests with us today. And I also want to acknowledge those that are tuning in to watch right now. Okay. And, you know, there are so many people who think that our children can't be reached. The way that you see Black children talked about. And I read a study recently where Black children, it's been said, Black children are the new cotton, because a lot of people are making multi-millions of dollars off of the failure of Black children, not off the success, but the failure of Black children. They say Black children are the new cotton, as cotton was a cash crop during the times of slavery. But there are those that think our children can't be reached. And I always like to say, those who think our children can't be reached have never seen a master teacher teach. And this is such a critical point to make here. Those who think our children can't be reached have never seen a master teacher teach. And I believe this is one of the key issues in public education today, is that most teachers have never been under the guidance of a master teacher. And most leaders have never been under the guidance of a master administrator that knows how to get tremendous results in a short period of time, like our brother Micheal Essien. And if you've never been under the guidance of a master teacher or a master administrator, guess what? You don't even know what's possible for our children. You don't know what's possible for me. And if you don't know what's possible for me, then you will teach down to me rather than calling me up to the highest level of my possibilities. And this is why I also like to say that master teachers don't engage students based on perceived deficiency, but on imminent possibility. One more time, master teachers don't engage students based on perceived deficiency, but on imminent possibility. And I like to talk about that because for so often, Black children are looked at in a certain way. And I was one of them. I was a victim of that same type of deficit thinking in the mind of teachers. For example, when I was in high school, when I had a teacher who called me up and accused me of plagiarism. He called me up. I handed him my paper. He asked me all these different words and what they meant in my paper. And I told him how each word was used and the dictionary definition and how I used it in context in the paper, but he still was not convinced. Something about his socialization and something about his schooling and education didn't tell him that a young Black male like me could write as I was writing. He didn't know that by the age of 25, I would write my first book. He didn't know that by the age of 35, I would have 8 books published, a number of video programs. He didn't know that I would become a teacher of the year, traveling nationally and internationally, and putting on my own conference where teachers and administrators would fly to Atlanta to be trained by me. He didn't know that Ebony Magazine would name me one of its 50 leaders of tomorrow. And I share this with you all, not to impress you, but to impress upon you why it is so important to view our children through the eyes of imminent possibility rather than through the eyes of perceived deficiency. And so as we examine these different issues as it relates to the achievement of our children, I want to say that, again, it's an honor to be here with you. With so many wonderful educators that are with us. And in the process of teaching teachers and leaders how to bring out the brilliance within our children, we've been able to establish not only helping teachers and leaders to have the right mentality, but to have the right methods and the materials. And so what we've done is we have developed a number of different books, online resources, and a number of different things to help bring out the brilliance within our children. Now, I want to go to a different part of the presentation. Can you still see my screen, or did I exit out of my screen?
You exit out of your screen.
Okay, no problem. I'm going to go right back to it in just a second. And I am watching my time, just so you know, because I want to be respectful of everyone's time here. All right. Let's see here. So can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So one of our great educators, clinical psychologist, Dr. Naeem Akbar, tells us that the first function of education is to provide identity. I would add to that identity determines activity. But bear this in mind, several years ago, I was logging into my email account and the news headline of the day came up with this picture. And it said that identity theft was the fastest growing crime in America. And this gave me pause because I don't know about you, but I've been a victim of identity theft before. And of course, that's when someone steals your personal information, uses that personal information to gain access to your wealth. And it can be very confusing. It can make you angry and disillusioned. But in the process of cleaning all that up, I had a dramatic revelation, and it is this, that our children are victims of what I call cultural identity theft. And cultural identity theft is when you steal a people's story. Okay, so how do you take the people that gave the world reading and writing and language and literature and architecture and engineering and mathematics and medicine, science and technology? How do you take that group of people and convince them that they're nothing but a race of pimps, players, criminals, and thugs? Cultural identity theft. But then we can go a step further, as one of my advisors and elders told me. She said, Chike, it's not just identity theft, it's identity replacement. Because these images are placed in broad media circulation all over the world, and you can get paid big money to act out these alien cultural images rather than being centered in your authentic cultural identity. And in the process, what happens is this causes cultural confusion. It causes cultural confusion when white folks look at Black folks and this is the image that they see in their mind. It causes cultural confusion when Asian or Hispanic folks look at these images and they think this is what it means to be Black. But what's most detrimental is when Black people look at these images and think that this is what it means to be Black? How can they know unless they have a teacher? And how can they have a teacher unless he or she be sent to clear up the cultural confusion? Okay. And this leads to conceptual incarceration and doesn't allow teachers to see who our children really are, just like that one teacher couldn't see the excellence that was within me. And so we like to say that today, as Dr. Asa Hilliard tells us, the formal education of most people of African ancestry is usually accomplished in systems that take us far away from ourselves, okay? I'm going to skip past this part because I want to get to the fact that education is identity restoration. Education is identity restoration. And I do want to go back to this for just a moment because Carter G. Woodson introduced us to the concept of miseducation back in 1933, almost 100 years ago. And that's the process of omitting truthful cultural knowledge and not preparing students for life as they will face it. And Wally Mubarudi came along later and said miseducation leads to diseducation. Well, what is diseducation? A process which leads the student to despise the very idea of learning. In other words, you've lied to me so much, guess what? I don't want to learn about nothing now. Ever seen that look on a child's face before? That's the result of diseducation and miseducation. So one more time, for outstanding, incredible, master teachers, understand that education is identity restoration. I believe that that's my time, so I'm going to stop right there and allow the conversation to flow from here. Thank you all so much for your time and attention.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and start passing around the same question that was asked about the opportunity gap for Black students. What does it mean? What does it affect in your classroom? If you guys want to go ahead and we can pass it around to whoever want to go first.
I would like Ms. Debra, if she's here, since she coined the term, well, she brought it to the horizons in her silver lining in her book. Debra, would you please kick this conversation off about this gap?
I will. First of all, I'm honored to be here. Thank you, Tachelle, for the invitation. And Dr. Akua, I just so wanted you to be here. Thank you for accepting the invitation to be here and just to kick us off, because you are a master teacher and you are, the teacher's teacher. I mean, you go around the country, with this whole sense of identity restoration, and I appreciate that. So years ago, maybe 15 years ago, I've been in the field now 45 years. So I'd say 15 years ago, I believe it was Dr. Jeannie Oakes out of UCLA who replaced the achievement gap language with opportunity gap. And I have been using it ever since, because I absolutely know that our children are brilliant and they're capable of achieving anything that they set their minds to. Dr. Asa Hilliard told us that decades ago, if they're given the same opportunities. Unfortunately, in these schools, our young people are not given the same opportunities, as Dr. Akua, mentioned, for excellence. But I do want to say that I had the privilege of listening to Dr. Wade Nobles yesterday. He is one of the founders of the Association of Black Psychologists. And he reminded us that it's rare that people say, Black people are amazing because. Black people are amazing because. And he challenged us in an exercise yesterday to list in the chat, Black people are amazing because. And we were able to list in that chat just all kinds of reasons why we are amazing people. So when we talk about replacing the narrative, replacing the negative stereotypes, replacing those images that Dr. Akua shared in his PowerPoint, that even Black teachers see in our children sometimes. When we're talking about the replacement of all of that with Black people are amazing because, and we list all of the things that make us amazing, then we can get to the restoration of their cultural identity, and we can bring out the brilliance that we know lies in each one of our children. So thank you.
All right, that was very powerful. I say for that. And we're gonna move down the line. The next person want to jump in and answer the question?
I'll step in. Dr. Akua and Mrs. Watkins, you guys hit that nail right on the head. A lot of what I call generational amnesia. We have forgotten the basics of our ancestors, of where we come from. Again, like you said, Dr. Akua, we forget that we built the villages and that we built the infrastructure of greatness, and we have accepted an idea that we are nothing. And in perpetuating it, we continue to create generations that never even realize who we were at the beginning. So most of our students nowadays can sing for you, excuse my language, wet ass pussy or WAP, but they can't tell you what lift every voice and sing is. They can't get you to those places where they know who they are, why they are. And beyond that, we are also looking at a generational gap. So we're educating kids for the 21st century, in which they have the access to everything in the world at their fingertips, but we don't know how to access that information as well. So the rest of the world are passing us by because they're accessing the technology, they're accessing their personal stories, and we're not able to make that connect. So what's happening for us is that we're staying stuck in a lull. We're still focusing in the 21st century. We're still looking at factory model learning. We're still looking at things as the way they used to be, and not even remembering what they used to be in its full integrity or its full greatness, and the rest of the world is passing us by. So to Dr. Akua's point and to Mrs. Watkins' point, we need to take that additional space of saying, who are I? Who am I? Great-grandmamas. We've got generations of kids who don't even know who their great-great-grandmother's name is, who've never seen a picture of who that person is. You've got kids who don't know who Rosa Parks are that are sitting in today's generation. So the institutions like our churches, institutions like the Jack and Jill clubs and the Boys and Girls clubs are no longer stepping in and filling that void. So we're missing that piece of cultural identity. So when we're looking to go back there, we've got to go back to the institutions that existed before. We're not remembering about the talented 10th. We don't remember that there's supposed to be a vanguard of us that are stepping up and that are filling the void for our children and giving them what they need to understand who they are. So in that space, as Black educators, it's up to us to be able to introduce that space. And not only to introduce that space to our children, but to generate conversations with our families. As we start moving into that space of having intentional conversations of who are you? Where do you come from? Why is it important? And not only who you come from, but dealing with the hurt and the trauma of where we come from. Most of us are still dealing with post-traumatic stress or post-slavery traumatic stress, that we have so much generational productions on us that we don't even know how to dig out of it, and we're not even willing to dig out of it. We, like Dr. Akua says, we are so ready to jump into that space of, oh, well, I'm a thug. There's a special that talks about Barack Obama versus Curtis 50 Cent and the ideas of Black masculinity. Those same spaces of who we look to and who are considered to be cool, or when we walk into white spaces and they're looking at us to be the trendsetters, but not the education setters. And then we introduce our ideal of stereotype threat. All of those things are the factors that are taking us away from that space of being who we are. And in order to be able to go back to that space, we have to be willing to do what Ayanna Benzet says, just to do the work, to sit down and say, it hurts. I don't know why. I don't remember who you are. Please teach me who you are. And then be willing to listen and go through that uncomfortable space. See, we don't like uncomfort. If it get uncomfortable or we start feeling a little bit out of the way, we want to run away from it, and we fall back into that stereotype or to those nomenclatures of who we are supposed to be. But when we take that time and say, okay, I'm gonna work on this, I'm gonna figure this out, I'm gonna be uncomfortable with it, I'm gonna ask my great grandmama a question and say, grandmama, you hurt me, and how do I get it fixed? Then we can start the spaces of being able to tap into our opportunity and to our true potential.
Wow, phenomenal message there. I think that's powerful. That's what we're trying to do here at both sides of the conversation. Have the taboo conversations, have the conversations that come with stigma, so we can change it in our community. We don't like to talk about things, but this is the way we can do it. The conversation, the communication, this is the pathway to the healing process that we need. So thank you for pointing that out, good brother. And we're going to move down the line. We got Will. Who want to jump in there next?
I would like to jump in. So I'm not here to state my opinion. I'm only quoting facts. And here's a fact. I believe that there is no will to educate Black and brown children at high levels in this country. Just think for a moment, what would happen if all the children were given the opportunity to realize their greatness? Debra Watkins. What would happen? Everything would close down. There will be no probation officers, social workers, legal defense teams, school reform organizations. We wouldn't have to spend money on millions of dollars on think tanks. Things will be eliminated. It is a profit to see Black children fail because they don't know their identity, their name. So that opportunity gap that we're talking about, it's real. It's about as real as this pandemic. End of my facts from Debra Watkins' book.
Phenomenal information. Let's keep pushing it down. I hope everybody remember what the question is. I'll put it back up there, but we gotta answer this question. The next person down the line.
Well, let me go.
I was gonna say I see the opportunity gap firsthand because my school is just that. I work at a continuation school here in San Francisco. At Downtown High School, and it's for all of the students that have been underserved and disadvantaged in their comprehensive high schools. And so the one thing that you see is that this education, they come to us, they're like, I don't know why school is a necessary must. This is pointless. I just want a job to make money. And so it's interesting to see almost every kid that come into our doors with that perception. And then as soon as you start tapping into their gifts, their passions, you see this spark that may not have been there since elementary school. And, you know, I carry this philosophy of like character first, education second, because that's my schooling. Like I went to this public charter school in Washington, D.C. Called Hyde Leadership Public Charter School. And their premise was develop a kid's character and academics will automatically follow, right? So the idea of like, if a student knows who they are, what they're capable of, and their unique potential, academics is absolutely going to fall in line afterwards. And so just growing up, right, not initially wanting to be an educator, but God and the spirits led me here. I see the importance of that. And so, you know, when they do come to us, their dreams start to switch from, oh, let me just be a security guard when I graduate to, wait a minute, I have had my eyes on an HBCU or City College. You see that. Instead of saying, hey, like I want to be a hairstylist or a makeup artist just because it's something easy, their sights switch on, well, wait a minute, I actually do want to pursue something in the medical field, et cetera, et cetera. So you definitely see what happens when an educator takes the time to say, listen, let me help you kind of like look at yourself and unearth the gifts and the talents that you already have, and then what happens from there.
Wow, I think that was phenomenal. I'm glad you pointed that out. But that is a real conversation that we have to continue to have because in our community, there are some kids who can handle the college atmosphere and there are some kids who cannot. So we still have to keep open the vocational opportunities, some of the arts and things of that nature, because our kids are just not all capable of doing that. And it's just a proven fact. So we just got to keep those other opportunities open. But I'm going to go ahead and move on down. Brother Micheal, if you want to jump in there, Tafar, who's jumping in there?
I'm jumping in, brother. Double Dutch, I'm jumping in. Even though I can't double Dutch, don't try to get me out on video. I can't double Dutch. So first of all, my name is Micheal Essien. I'm the CEO and founder of Essien Education Group. It's an education consulting group that assists students, parents, teachers, counselors, administrators, and districts with addressing the issues of the opportunity gap, addressing the issues that exist with over-policing of Black children, the issues of disproportionality of Black children, of over-representation in special education. So this is what I do. And I'm also a principal here in the Bay Area. So what I want to do, I want to lean in and I want to answer this one question. People are talking about this opportunity gap for Black students, but it's also opportunity gap for Black educators as well. They go hand in hand, right? And so let me share my screen as I lean into this conversation. Can people see my screen?
Nope. You got to hit the share function.
I did hit the share. All right, let me go share. Can you see it now?
All right, there we go. Now we have it up.
All right. So here's what we're talking about. Why do we have the opportunity gap for Black students and Black educators? Equity is an issue. So if we're going to try to address equity, we're trying to find out where each child and each Black educator receives what they need to develop to their full academic and social potential. And for the student, more times than not, we tend to use the punishment of discipline. We over-police them in the social aspect, sending to the office, suspensions, kicking them out of the classrooms, which impacts the academic. So if we're going to address this equity issue for Black students, we need to address how we relate to students when it comes to rules and regulations inside the classroom, inside the school, when you're outside of the classroom, because that's impacting the students inside the classroom. And we will get into why that is. Looking at Black educators, it's the same thing. Black educators need to be valued for their academic knowledge. More times than not, the things that we say, how we present things based upon our own cultural experiences, those things are not valued in a space that is white normative. That impacts leadership opportunities, that impacts the opinion being used to actually set policy or interpret a rule and regulation that would be for the benefit of kids. Those things are impacting the social status of African American or Black teachers inside the building. And so when we start talking about the opportunity gap, it's not just for Black students, it's also for Black educators who are impacted by this both academically and socially. And why are they impacted? Why do we need to deal with this equity issue? Why is this a problem? We all know that we live and we were raised in a racist society here in the United States. It's at the foundation of who this country is, right? So we need to hold real conversations. We can't avoid the real conversations, and the real conversations are around this. This is what's happening. We talk about school systems. School systems don't exist in a vacuum, they exist in a culture. And if you look at this diagram is what I call the waters of implicit bias. The waters of implicit bias is society. It's how we're raised. And we've heard Dr. Akua, we heard Queen Debra, and we heard Brother Paris and lean in around these particular things around culture. Culture is just not how we think about ourselves. Culture is also the stuff that we've been exposed to. When we watch TV, who sets the terms of who's a hero, who's a villain? How often have we seen a movie where the Black person gets killed early in the movie? These images create biases within us. But there are other things. How many times do you see a situation where the Cosby Show was running around and they said that was not normal because you're not supposed to have a married couple and Black kids just being normal, right? You have to have some deviance in there. Somebody has to be a thug, like Good Times. You got to live in the projects or whatever the case may be in order for you to be authentically Black. Well, there's a bias that exists for all Black people. The media images, the culture in which we were raised in, although we say we are positive, we have been exposed to this. And so when I'm walking down the escalator to catch BART and a white woman turns back and sees a Black man coming down, she clutches her purse. It has nothing to do with she understands who I am as a person. It is the water that she is swimming in. It's this water that has produced how we think at the deepest unconscious levels of who we are and what we do. And so when we walk into spaces, we act on these things unconsciously. So what is happening inside of these school places when we have our kids walking in? Not only are we over policing our children. If you see, I highlighted a few boxes, a few words in here. Compliance is one thing that we often deal with. Downtown high, those kids, the kids that are downtown high, they don't do compliance well. That's why they're downtown high. Well, why weren't they doing compliance well? People didn't build relationships with them. Why didn't you build relationships with kids? Because when a Black child or a brown child does something, we ascribe adult behaviors and intentions to that child, and then we treat them as such. We're heavy-handed with the punishment. We don't view kids as individuals that we need to support them with their full academic and social potential. If we are looking to do that for children, things will happen for kids. But you have to view that kid as somebody who is deserving and worthy of receiving your support to reach their full academic and social potential. But we're swimming in the waters of implicit bias where racism lives, white supremacy, this whole thing around control. There are traditions. What you don't, segregation. I work in San Francisco Unified School District. We are the most segregated school district in the entire state of California. Now you reflect on that for a minute. How in the world is San Francisco the most segregated school district in the entire state? And once you figure that out, then you come and explain to me how we can be talking about social justice and equity and meaning it from a level in which we're trying to make real change. If you can explain it to me, help a brother out, because I'm looking for that explanation. Because we have these implicit biases, we accept things happening to our children. It's okay for a kid from the Bayview to make it to my middle school and be in the 6th grade and read at the 2nd grade level. Where do you do that at? And I use an example. I'm a former football player, college football player. An example is what I use in a conversation with a couple of friends is if you went to a football game to watch the football game and you're supposed to say they're engaged in football, and as the ball is snapped, wide receivers don't know how to run plays, the linemen don't know how to block, the quarterback doesn't know how to throw, you would ask, like, what in the hell is going on here? This is not football. How did these guys get on the field? What is going on? People want their money back. I'm going to say, when you go into a game and you see that people don't know what they're doing, you have to ask, well, what was the coaching like that allowed these guys to get onto the field? Because you need to address the coaching. Because if a guy doesn't know how to run a route, if a running back doesn't know how to run the ball, and receiver doesn't know, quarterback doesn't know how to throw, and a lineman doesn't know how to block, there are some problems with the coaching. We don't ask the question, how are Black kids getting to middle school and high school and only reading at the 2nd and 3rd grade level? Who allowed this to happen? Somebody needs to be held accountable, because we are not talking about them as learners on academics. We're talking about them in terms of compliance and discipline. We are missing the boat that we're not educating our children. And that's because of this system of implicit bias. The waters of implicit bias have us focused in on compliance, control, and that allows everybody else to not focus on the fact that we are failing our kids to develop them as learners and thinkers who are someday going to be adults. And why? We don't have a lens to look at what is happening. And I'm putting forward here in this conversation that critical race theory is the framework to look at what is happening to our Black students inside of public education, outside of public education in independent schools and private schools, and what is actually happening in society in general. When I heard about the narrative has been changed and now we believe in something else. Like we don't believe that we have built the pyramids and now we believe in being thugs, pimps, hoes, and etc. How do we unpack the normative narrative and produce our own counter storytelling narrative? Critical race theory is a framework that we're going to need to lean into so that we can begin to address the opportunity gap that exists not only for our students who are in public education, but our Black educators who are also in the same space. I won't go any deeper than to say this on one of the pieces around the whiteness as property. If we begin to look at what is happening inside of schools as far as the opportunity gap for students and educators, if we see school systems as being owned by the general society, the white society that owns it, the things that are occurring to Black students and the fact that it's being allowed only speaks to what we already know, that in a racist society, Black people are on the lowest rung. And when you begin to see that what is happening inside our schools, that the opportunity gap fits this overall theory, then you can begin to move in different spaces around a correcting this without necessarily being angry. You can find out what the real issues are, and then how can we specifically change. I don't want to go up to the school site and be angry at the principal. I want the rules. Where are the rules? I want to see your suspension rules. We need to change that. I want to see what is the curriculum that you're using to teach my child. Why is my child in the 4th grade and reading at the 1st grade level? What books are you using? Because until we begin to hold the system accountable for developing our children to their full academic and social potential, we will be constantly trapped in this conversation around pointing the finger at somebody being racist when our kids are slowly but surely being prepared for the school to prison pipeline.
Wow, phenomenal. Yeah, that's a mic drop moment right there. I know a lot of our elected officials and school board people are logging in. I'm seeing these fly across my text. This is a great conversation. And, I think, Micheal, you hit on something, but the accountability is us. So we got to start at the home base first. We already know that our home's been damaged with drugs and different things, but we got to first, as community, because sometimes our community do point the finger too much at everybody else, and they don't ever want to take the accountability. It starts at home. So a lot of the failure started from home, dealing with some of the things that our community has been dealing with. And I know some of it is systemic. I know some of it was designed, but we have to acknowledge that was the start, right? And then when we pass our kids on to our educators, there's been a failure there as well. So we have to hold our teachers, we have to hold our principals, we have to hold our boards accountable, because again, it's their job as well when they're there to help correct it. And I know we always can't do it, but that's kind of the things that we are looking for as community. But again, it starts with community, and then it goes to the educators, and then to our elected officials. And we know that there's a systemic issue when it comes to education across not only the state of California, across this country, as well as the city of San Francisco. And there's a lot of work that need to be done. And I hope that the people on the board that's watching, some of our elected officials, it is time to band together and deal with these issues, because again, we cannot have our young kids, like you said, being passed along into the system, not reading at the level that they're reading in, and being pushed into these privatized prisons. And that's happening, and we need to fix that. Tachelle, I see you have your hand up, but I want to get to Tafara and Shari, because we're getting close. Okay. The time is just moving fast.
So Miss Tafara Manning.
Yes, I can jump in. Can you guys hear me well?
Yes,
all right.
ma'am.
I'm Tafara Manning. I'm an elementary educator in San Francisco. I've seen the opportunity gap in so many different angles. Everyone on the panel that have spoken so far, I've hit the nail right on the head. I totally agree. And so, for example, I have substituted in San Francisco for many years, from K to 12. I've worked in the preschools, and I've worked in middle schools for a long period of time, and elementary for extended period of time. And I've taught 5th grade for a few years and kindergarten. And so just seeing where all the gaps come in, how they come in, it's there. So, and I totally agree with the cultural, right? The cultural and the competence, all that, we need to really get that together. For example, I think that if the gap for me is when students, when things that we're teaching in the classroom, the students are practicing, that they're learning in the classroom, we're not making it tangible in real life for them. We're talking about Black and brown students. We're teaching them information, but we're not making it tangible, and we're not connecting it to real life in their everyday life. That's what's causing one of the gaps, and we have to address that. And also, you taking what's familiar to them within their culture or the community, and what's familiar in their home, in their school, in their community, and making that, and also what's unfamiliar to them, but what's interesting, and taking that and using that as a point of entry to build knowledge and to build those skills. For example, a student may want to read a graphic novel that is popular amongst their peers, but they can't read and it's not at their level. Some teachers may say, you can't read that right now because this is whatever reading time in class and you need to read a book at your level. But if the kid is really interested, you take that as a point of, oh, okay, you don't know these words, but let me support you in how you can access this. So now since they want to read that, I feel that they're going to work with you more in order to access the knowledge that they need in order to read, building up their phonics skills. But they first have to be faced with the fact that they don't know it, they want to know it, and then you give them the tools and the support to get them there. And so the question was, what does the opportunity gap mean? It means that the students are being taught some of these basic skills, some of this information, but without giving them without really allowing them to know how they're going to need it and use it in the future. So there's different types of students. There's students that comply with you and do everything that you want them to do. They get the straight A's. And then when they get to other grade levels, they're not able to access that knowledge because they did it for you at that moment to comply, but they didn't connect it and why they needed to keep that knowledge for the rest of their life. There's students who aren't paying attention and aren't getting it because they're not interested. And then they don't have access later on because they're not interested. And no one has told them that you need to learn this because you're going to have to use this later in life. Some of the effects that I see within the classroom, I see students, they're not interested in what they're being taught. They're missing information. They're missing the opportunity to gain skills that they're going to use to advocate for themselves. Our students, they advocate for themselves, but sometimes they're not equipped in order to do it in a way that is going to give them the result that they need. So I'm done at this moment. I'll pass the mic to the next person. Thank you.
Sherry, did you want to jump in there?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Oh, hi, everyone. My name is Shari Taylor, and thank you, Brother John Henry and my sister Tachelle for the invitation. And I've heard such great speakers and educators prior to me, so I don't know what else to say, but there is one category that I feel very passionate about that is the gap, the opportunity gap, and that's financial literacy. That is financial literacy. As you know, in our counterparts, the Caucasian household, their students, their children know what it is to have a life insurance policy, what it is to have a bank account, what it is to dabble in stocks and bonds. But our households, we don't practice that. We shun upon it. We're not knowledgeable of it. And so it's very important to teach our children how to just open up a simple account, a simple savings account, a simple checking account. Even when they get in high school, they need to have their own identity. So it's very important, financial literacy, how to make money, how to open your own business at an elementary age. You can sell Kool-Aid, you can sell popcorn, how to establish this self-employment at a young age. And another thing is politics. We don't teach our children politics. Politics, every household we know of in our culture, community, if they're going to vote for every 4 years the president. And that's all they know, every 4 years. What they don't understand is politics takes place in the community, in the local elections. The local elections are far more important than the every 4 year presidential elections, because the local elections governs what happens to your schools, to your streets, to your roads, to everything that happens to you immediately. And then you know how to lobby. So the thing that we are not doing, it's a disservice in our own community, is not teaching our children financial literacy and politics. And if we don't know it, then we need to reach out to someone who does know it. But we need to get this implemented in the school districts, how to teach financial literacy and how to teach politics. And I'm a teacher of a few districts, major districts. San Francisco Unified School District is the most recent. I've been with San Francisco Unified School District since 1991. And I've also taught at Las Vegas School District. And prior to that, I worked for the Department of Defense Dependent Schools in Okinawa, Japan, on a military base. And so it's very important. That's my passion, financial literacy. Thank you for your time.
Wow, I'm glad you said that because I agree with you. Financial literacy is a big part, but I think in our community, we got to start number one with mental health, financial literacy, and we're going to keep pushing through because those are the real things. And that's what we're trying to do here at both sides of the conversation with our educational Thursdays. Every Thursday, we have different financial people. And actually, this Thursday, we're having another financial literacy person come on and keep educating the community about this debt and understanding how this credit and things work. And we just got to keep doing it. And it's going to take a lot of conversation, but I would agree with you. Financial literacy is a big thing. And then the politics, understanding how it runs. I think we need to I'm going to reach out to some people, but we definitely on the local end need to do a better job of educating our young people, understanding the three branches of government, how it works, and really understand where the systemic racism starts at the top when we're looking at our Constitution and things of that nature to be really breaking up some of these issues. So I'm glad you said that. That was very what we needed to hear. But mental health, I'm still going to keep pushing it as number one in our community. We got to make it cool. We got to get our leaders involved and some of our entertainers and influencers because mental health is the big problem in our community that we have to address. And we're going to keep fighting for that. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the next question here. And we're going to start it off. We got 2 questions after that. I know we at 3 o'clock. I promised to show that we was going to get out of here at 4, but I can see the conversation is heating up. We might go over early, but if you need to jump off, we understand. We won't take it personal. And my brother Tyson is just logging in too, so we have to get to his piece. So I already kind of knew we was going to go over, but we respect anybody that needs to jump out of here. But I want the community to hear this because they've been waiting all week to hear from our Black educators. And there's a lot of people watching that need to understand what's going on and how do we support. And we don't get a lot of time in these spaces to have these real conversations. So hopefully you all can stick around. I know Tachelle's going to be kicking me because she's trying to get everybody out of here because I know you guys are going back to the classrooms and doing things for the community. But again, community is watching today. This will be replayed on our website and on our YouTube. And we want to make sure that community, if they missed this today, they get to hear from you all so that they can continue to support everyone here today. So we're going to go ahead and jump into the next question. And whoever wants to start off, we'll lead there. Brother Tyson, I see you here. Welcome, brother. They already read your bio in the beginning, but we know you was coming in a little late. Glad to see you here, my brother.
Right on. It's great to be here.
Thank you, Tyson, for coming. So the next question, in your opinion, what can schools do to better and serve students who have been historically underserved? And I want to kick it off because Dr. Akua, I did change the language at SF State from master teacher to main teacher. So please forgive me if I said that earlier, but I just want to give the credit to Michael Essien and Will Paris and Marcus Blackshear before me. To answer this question, in 2015, I wrote, hypothetically, what if there was a legal way to separate students of color and keep them in a special day classroom, isolated from the rest of the school, without any rigorous coursework or academic development? Assume that these students had social and emotional behavior, and it was lawful to place them in segregated classrooms. How would an educator work with them in order to develop goals and a transition plan for them to be integrated into a general classroom? For the last 9 years, I've worked as a paraprofessional in the Northern California high school with students of color with social and emotional behavior problems. For the last 2 years, I have witnessed students of color transition into general education classrooms for a brief moment before they give up and return to a segregated special day classroom. I have studied to be an educator my entire life. Now I wonder if I could teach in a segregated classroom with students who were misbehaving or always isolated from social interactions. When I was given the privilege to work at Willie L. Brown Middle School, I thought about my title, Integrate or Segregate, Pushing Marginalized Students to the Edge of Education. Diane Gray, myself, and anybody with 94124 blood in their body, we built a school brick by brick so that we can better our community and better the school and serve students who were underserved. And Ms. Taylor, if I'm lying, I'm flying. Our kids are amazing. They didn't hit the honor roll all 4 years. So if the district wants to know how to build better schools, they better build a better relationship with CBOs in their community. They better start treating us on this panel way better than what they have done before. And I wrote this thesis in 2015. So not only are our children in the margins, they so deep down in the crack. If we don't get therapists, psychologists, first ladies, John Henry and the Omega crew, Sean Richards in these schools, Micheal Essien, your community school, we here. We need to be next to you. I love what you do at your community school. All schools should have color on the cement and the walls. Your kids that are in your school can read. They are graduating high school. They need to switch up and put some paint on the walls and some Afrocentricness in those books, because that's what I did. Anybody else would like to answer that heavy question?
Well, before I'm going to say something very brief. Then I want Tyson Amir to jump in because, you know, one of the reasons why I really wanted him to be part of, because he's already starting to do things in schools that really are beginning to transform how children experience schools. But one thing that I will say that's critically important based on my 45 years of experience in the field of education is that we have to start at the schools of education. Schools of education that are preparing these are ill-equipped. Let me just put it mild, massively ill-equipped, let me name it, to produce the kinds of young people that should be now coming into the profession. And I can say this with such authority because I've been in the field for 45 years and I've watched what they've done in these schools of education. And they've done a horrible job in general across the country, preparing teachers to embrace our children and see the genius that we know lies within all of them, not just Black kids, all of the ones that are capable. But especially the Black ones who are always marginalized, that anti-Blackness is real. But Tyson, can you share with them what you've been doing in schools throughout the Bay Area? Start with the superintendent story in the high school district where I taught for 37 years, if you don't mind, Tyson.
I appreciate that, Debra. It's good to be here. I'm hoping that y'all are able to hear me. I know I didn't get a chance to do a sound check earlier. I'm coming.
Yeah,
right?
we can hear you good.
All right. So with that, so to the larger question, I think a couple things that came to mind. So one thing automatically was a quote from Huey, co-founder of the Black Panther Party, and he said that power is the ability to define phenomena and make it act in a desired manner. That comes to mind because we're using terminology that comes from a pathological or a diseased educational institution when it comes to how our young people are being treated. So they use the language of segregation and integration. We need to, as you were mentioning, community-based organizations, community partners, just people in community in general, we have to play an influential, active, controlling role when it comes to the education that our community is going to receive. This institution that has operated in ways to use its institutional influence to impact us violently in all these different violent ways that we can see, is not going to teach our young people properly. And I'm sure that's something that's already been said multiple times. And so then using the example that Debra was asking me to speak about with the Eastside Union High School District, a couple of years after my book came out, the superintendent there took a chance, and that's based on the work that Debra had been doing there for years in that district to get that district to begin dealing with our students differently, and then bringing in people from the community that have the ability to do that work. So Debra gave the handoff to me, and then as the district became more aware of the work that I was doing, the superintendent said, I'm going to purchase, I think they purchased 1,800 copies of my book, Black Boy Poems, and gave that to every certificated staff member in the district, and then use that as a way to begin exploring the Black experience, and then linking that to school data, which was showing how, like, this is another one of those words, like underserved. It's not underserved, it's intentionally underserved. These districts are making the decision to not serve our children properly. So, but looking at the data from the district on how our students have not been succeeding based on the institutional structure of that district. So using Black Boy Poems as a reference, highlighting that with the data on why they need to do better when it comes to our students, and then bringing in the community voices, community organizations, people such as Debra, such as myself, that have a book, have a curriculum, have programming that centers the Black experience, and then never compromises the integrity of the learning experience. These young people, they get it, like you said, for 4 years, your kids have been on honor roll and beyond, you know what I'm saying? Like, they get that, and they get this liberatory, empowerment, informed educational experience. So they did that, and then since then, every year they have moved themselves out the way and allowed us to occupy more and more space in their educational system to provide the type of programming, training, curriculum, literature support that is necessary for our students to succeed. And as of now, like in this 2020-2021 school year with this particular district we're talking about, I have 3 different relationships with them, contractual relationships. One is reshaping their entire social studies curriculum to make it more culturally relevant, centering the Black experience in that. This year, we've been focusing on US history and world history. So that entire curriculum is going to be redesigned with the knowledge and the experience of a community member and other community partners to broaden the scope of world history. To broaden the scope of social studies. Next year, we'll be focusing on government economics, and we'll continue scaling up every single year until the entire course offerings to the social studies have been changed, new books, new literature, having community members on hand that can help support with the implementation of that curriculum. That's the type of stuff that needs to happen in multiple districts throughout this country if we are going to say one of our only possibilities of education for our young people is dealing with the existing educational institution. We, of course, need to have our own institutions that we control, which are going to serve our students properly. But dealing with the reality that we have where most of our students are going to districts that we don't control in that way, then we need to occupy those districts however we can, and then begin to exert our influence on the curriculum, the programming, the support structures that are provided there to make sure that our students are taken care of properly.
Man, that was phenomenal. I'm glad you said that. Real quick, I just want to let I know a couple people are texting. If you guys are on our YouTube page and you want to leave live comments and live chat, you have to click the live chat function on YouTube to get your question up here on the screen. That's how you do it. You have to click the live chat. I see people asking they can't put their questions or comments up. Please use the live chat function on YouTube, and then we'll get it up here on the screen. But Tyson, thank you for saying that, because I think it matched back to the financial literacy part. And this is why I'm always on these calls fighting and screaming and kicking with people from these departments who want to do these co-op ownerships and different things in our community that doesn't work. We have to understand that the money for these school districts come off homeowner taxes. Okay, we don't have enough Black home ownership to push our agenda to get the funding that we need to get into our schools. And that's why I'm so against these co-ops opportunities. Yes, the opportunity to give our people opportunity to ownership, but it doesn't give them true ownership. And sometimes that impacts our community when it comes to funding. We know our teachers are impacted with a financial equity gap as well. And only way we get that is through ownership. So the financial part is real. We have to promote business ownership, home ownership in our community. We can't go with the alternatives. We have to have ownership to really push to make change and close these equity gaps. So with that being said, I'll ask to put go ahead, Mike.
On that question that you posed originally around how to better serve students.
Go ahead.
One of the things we have to acknowledge, the student is not isolated. And I think this is one of the things that happens in this so-called objective world that's part of what we consider white supremacy culture, is that what do we need to do for the student? Any student that's at a school anywhere is part of a family and is part of a community. So what needs to be addressed or healed or supported is the family and the community. A kid is not isolated. And so the harm that exists in our communities all across this nation has not been addressed. So we mentioned accountability. We can't move to accountability until we actually do some healing. There's some real anger and frustrations in our community, and we've seen it. George Floyd didn't happen here, but we have stories here in San Francisco, stories in Oakland. I came from LA, where I came from the culture that produced the group NWA to create the song F the Police. I came from that culture. We have to heal the community in which these students come from. And how do we do that at the school level? Community school strategy. I had the pleasure of meeting with the state superintendent, Superintendent Tony Thurman. He has allocated in his budget $300 million in the state to implement community school strategies. How many of us even know what community school strategies are? MLK is one of the few community schools in terms of the definition of community schools that NEA, the National Education Association, has defined. How many people know what that means? So when your child comes to my school site, we get to talk to the family. We get to find out what's going on with the family. You got food issues or whatever the case may be, then we can go out and partner with agencies to address the issues of the family and the student while in school and outside school. So we have over 50 different agencies that partner with my school site during the daytime to deliver services to the entire family, because a kid's learning ability, a kid's social ability are not isolated based upon what you do inside of a classroom. There are so many bigger things happening. And if you don't believe me, you go check the lawsuit, look it up. The Competence Unified got sued by some families. So I want to push forward this idea of community school strategy. And I know we don't do it. I'm in the process of creating a free workshop this summer so that I can share with our families, so that next year, if they put another $300 million inside the state budget for community schooling throughout the state, we could advocate for it in our schools so that we can better support our students, so we can better support our families. And the last thing I will say, like, how do we serve them? Like, I think this the community school strategy. We need to do some healing, but we also need to find out what places are being successful in educating our kids inside of public education and outside of public education. And when we find out those things, we need to highlight it. And I want to call attention to just one place, and I'm gonna be quiet. John Muir Elementary School here in San Francisco Unified. The principal over there, her name is Sarah Liebert. They're doing some amazing work with Black and brown kids. If you go back 4 to 5 years ago, Black and brown kids were like 3 and 5% proficient on the SBAC. That means they had an average score that was considered good. In a short span of time, like 3 to 4 years, those same Black and brown kids went from 3 and 5% proficient to 38 and 45% proficient in a span of 3 years. Whatever they're doing over at John Muir, we need to say we want that for wherever our Black and brown kids are located. We want that same stuff too. But parents need to be investigators. They need to find out, where are the successes happening for our children? Community school strategies. And if you look into what's going on over there at John Muir under the leadership of Sarah Liebert, it's lesson study. Like, these are things, I'm not going to go into details, but I'm telling you, in the community, you need to do deeper research around community schooling and lesson study, because they do help our Black children.
Well, let me say this real quick, because I am the oldest one up here, up in here, with the most experience in the field. Let me just say that study has been done multiple times. There are multiple books out there. Dr. Rex Fortune, actually, you know, and I'll go off camera and run and get the book for later. But he's actually already examined where Black children are succeeding. Remember, there is no will to educate Black children at high levels in this country. Be very clear about that. That's why Carter G. Woodson told us in the 30s, in the Miseducation of the Negro, that the school system was never designed for the success of Black children, right? So we should not be surprised that systems that were never designed for our success are failing our children. Let's not be shocked about that, okay? We have 400 years in this country, right? This didn't just happen overnight. George Floyd is not an anomaly. If you go to the Equal Justice Initiative's museum in Montgomery, Alabama, they call it the Lynching Museum for short. You'll see the names of thousands of Black people who were lynched. So anyway, all I'm going to say is that I will go off camera and I will grab that book. And actually, I'm going to grab a few books, because there's some things being said tonight that have already been covered by some of the amazing scholars that I have been bringing to Stanford University for the past almost 2 decades. And we have another summer institute coming up. I don't want to miss the opportunity to announce that during this call. We have a summer institute coming up June 14th, 15th, and we're going to be centering some other amazing scholars, one of them being Dr. Patina Love, who talks about abolishing the entire system and starting over. See, that's what I favor. And I also favor segregated schools, by the way. I think Tyson mentioned we need our own institutions where it's by Black people, Black children. And these are conscious Black people. Because just because you're Black doesn't mean that you're for Black kids. Okay. So don't get that twisted. All right. If you read my book, I only had white teachers from K to 12. I happen to do well in that Eurocentric frame, but I realize that is a flawed frame. It is a white supremacist frame that I just managed to make it through. But most of the people that went through that system did not do well. So I'm just saying, let's be clear. But I'm gonna go off camera so I can go and get me some books to share with y'all.
I'm glad you said that, because I was about to say, hold on, this conversation is getting a little to the left. I needed to keep it real, and I'm glad you say that, because I've been questioning that. Is it time for us to put because it's a certain way our young people learn, and I think we are too old school in this country. We are so far behind, and I know Dr. Flowers put in a comment about curriculum. I really think it is time for us to rethink the curriculum for our young Black kids. And again, we have to see people that look like us. So I've had
Tyson's working on but also Dr. Akua, can you jump in for just a minute? Dr. Akua and his wife, they started their own school. They were not going to put their own children in harm's way. So Dr. Akua, can you talk about your school and what you did? And I'm gonna go off camera and go get some books for y'all. Okay.
One second before you speak, Doc. So what I was trying to say is very important that we had this conversation, because we have to figure out a way for our young people. And I've had a couple of these education conversations, and I'm getting the same sense from all the educators that's come on this show, from Dr. Flowers to some of the young people at Urban Ed, some of our other educators. They're not seeing us in the classroom, right? They want to see Black educators. They want to see more Black leadership, because I think Micheal hit on it earlier. There's a failure in leadership. And part of it is because it's not enough of us who are in the positions to make these decisions. So we got to start there. But we know that starts with pay. I've had several teachers come on here, especially in San Francisco. They can't afford to work where they live. And again, this is a real conversation that we really need to have. And I'm glad everybody's here, because there's a lot of talks about reparations. There's a lot of money talks across this country about how to impact the Black community. And I think education is the starting point for everything. So we have to really talk about this equity gap in pay. How do we pay our teachers so that we can close this gap to get our teachers in our school? How do we use this technology to help educate our young people? Because there are other programs that I've seen across the country who are using music and arts to educate our young people. We have to be open to these different ways of education, but it starts with the financial part as well, keeping the people engaged. And I'm gonna ask Mike later more about this community school, because also community school look like people from the community having access to the funding to be able to empower our young people who know how to deal them, because a lot of times this gap in our community to have with our educated elites and some of the people that's not, the people who can work with the young people and can relate to them. We need to get these people and individuals into our classroom. I am connected with a couple of brothers with an organization called Time Done. And there's a powerful brother named Terrence Stewart, who's a teacher, but because of his background, his arrest worker is keeping him out of the classroom. He's a deep brother. And this conversation is going to keep going, but we got to get the people who look like us and are impacting our young people into these classrooms so that we can make sure that they're getting the support they need. Doctor, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. Sorry about that.
You got to unmute, brother.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Sure. I hope before we leave, we'll have a chance to hear maybe one of those amazing poems by Brother Tyson Amir. But Mama Debra asked me to talk a little bit about the school that my wife founded, which was called Saba Academy. And we were serving grades 1 through 5. And it was amazing because, going back to something Brother Micheal Essien said, it wasn't just the students. It was a community that we had built. So much so that when schools were canceled due to inclement weather, the children would complain to their parents. It was just an amazing community. Regrettably, however, we were not able to sustain it because the very parents who wanted to send their children to our school could not afford to. So when you talk about the fact that we need our own schools, no question about it. because no one can teach our children what they need to know and who they need to be better than we can. And so when we talk about equitable funding and different things of that nature, we do need to re-examine it. And there are a number of independent Black schools that are doing just that. I want to challenge the listeners to check out the CB, the Council of Independent Black Institutions. Again, CB, Council of Independent Black Institutions. Here in Atlanta, where I'm based, we have Quilombo Pan-African Institute. We have ABEN Institute. We have AYA Educational Institute. And you can look these up online. In Chicago, one of the best schools that I've seen anywhere with Baba Marcus Klein is Freedom Home Academy. Again, Freedom Home Academy, where he has children that are 3 and 4 years old that are reading, middle school level words, children who are 5, 6, and 7 doing high school and college level work. So go on Facebook, go on YouTube, friend Marcus Klein with a K, K-L-I-N-E, because he has all sorts of videos demonstrating it. And again, I go back to the fact that most of us don't know what our children are capable of. And that is one of the things that's energizing some of our challenges. So culture is the key, but our culture is also the cure. I want to go back to something that Brother Michael Essien said a moment ago when he was talking about getting the community involved, that our children are not isolated people by themselves. One of my friends and colleagues, Principal Sean Hurt out of Inkster, Michigan, just outside of Detroit, did something very, very interesting. He understood that his children were coming from a low socioeconomic background and that many of their parents were struggling. So a lot of principals and teachers complain about not having parent engagement. The question is, have you properly engaged them on their terms? Principal Sean Hurt went out into the community, knowing that his parents were struggling. And he formed partnerships with local businesses. And he asked them to come out and set up a table at his parent meeting if they were interested in hiring any new employees. And do you know that he had and continues to have overwhelming participation in an inner city school, because the parents knew that when they came to the parent meeting, they weren't just going to hear about what was going on at the school. They would literally be able to interview, and many dozens walked away from the parent meeting with a new job. That is leading with the community in mind. And these are the things that we need to be considering. In addition to that, Sister Tachelle mentioned earlier about the need for social emotional learning. I like to remind us that prior to COVID-19, we were already dealing with intergenerational and multi-generational unaddressed trauma. One more time, intergenerational, passed on from one generation to the next, but multi-generational, generation to generation to generation to generation, unaddressed trauma. And those issues show up in the schools. Those issues show up in the classroom. So if I, as a teacher, have not been trained in culturally responsive teaching practices that are embedded with social emotional learning modalities, then I'm going to struggle and my students are going to fail. But when I have been taught properly the different culturally responsive teaching techniques embedded with culturally relevant and social emotional learning modalities, then my students thrive and can outperform just about anybody else. These are just a few of the things that I want us to consider.
Awesome. Will, you want to jump in there?
I do. I think all the comments you guys.
Oh, no.
I think he froze up. We'll go ahead and move to someone else who want to jump in there, and we'll try to get Brother Will back in a second.
I would like to speak.
Go ahead, sister.
Okay, so as of this year, this spring, San Francisco Unified School District will have an additional required course, which will be Black Studies, or the African American Studies. So I think it is very important if we can advocate through our districts to include Black Study required courses, not just an elective, but a required course. And this will help our own students, our own community, learn about their own culture.
Totally agree. at Michael Essien's infamous Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, period, Jr., his Black Student Union is the best, and Willie Brown's is the best, because as a community school, 100% college prep gets to go in at lunch, feed the kids and the staff, and really establish not an elective, but an alternative way of learning in life. And his teachers join to have a history teacher come in and learn about Mansa Musa and then turn around and teach about it. I was on cloud 9. So Mansa Musa is not in our textbooks. Neither is, I can't think of the sister's name, the Cushites. Chemistry is from Kemet. So these community schools that will be rebuilt, I hope that they will rebuild them the way that the world was really shaped, from the Phoenicians traveling across making boats. I don't know about this Columbus dude, but Bartholomew really helped him because he sailed with the Moors. You know, anybody disagree on this panel? Okay. John, can you ask Diane's question that she asked? She wants to, I think she put it in there. Okay. Yeah. Can you ask the question?
She wants to know, do you guys think that the charter schools are part of the solution? Is charter schools part of the solution to fix our Black education issue?
I celebrate any attempts that that teachers and leaders are making to reach our children. However, we must understand that charter schools are still governed largely by the state. You have to go to the state to get the charter and to maintain the charter. We've also found that the funding is not oftentimes what it needs to be. That charter school leaders oftentimes have to raise additional funds to make ends meet and so forth. And I know some very serious educators who had to take out a second mortgage on their home, leading a charter school, because the state withheld some of their funds, playing games with the money and different things of that nature. To those that are running the charter schools and doing a wonderful job, I support them and have done a good deal of work with charter schools. However, it doesn't replace the need for us to have our own, where we make the decisions, where we are the certifying agents, and where we are the ones who are determining what the curriculum is and the energies that we're going to put towards that. I've served teachers and leaders in independent schools, religious schools, charter schools, all of those. I believe the impetus need to go more into our independent schools. But again, I celebrate those that are doing outstanding work in charter schools and public schools as well.
And I would like to add on to what Brother Dr. Akua was sharing. I believe in choice. I think anytime parents have choice, it's always good for parents to have choice. But more times than not, when we talk about charter schools, we talk about charter schools from the ideal perspective, from a theoretical perspective. But I've been an educator now for almost 3 decades. And I worked in Oakland for 21 years. That was like ground zero for charter schools within the system. There's how things are implemented, and things aren't implemented in isolation. When I showed you the waters of implicit bias, that has all the segregation, it has white supremacy culture, it has accountability, all of that comes into play. And at the core, when we start talking about the implementation, there was this initial conversation around charter schools where charter schools were creaming, where they only took the good kids. And I remember in Detroit, some charter schools had the ability to even not include kids who had IEPs. Now, I'm not talking about what was in their actual charter for implementation. I'm talking about what is actually happening in the schools. I worked in Oakland, and there was a school, KIPP. KIPP every year put so much pressure on the kids that had IEPs that were allowed in that they would leave the school every year. So KIPP had fewer kids that had IEPs inside the school. So then what does that mean? Then you're getting a higher concentration of kids that have IEPs in the traditional public school, and you're getting kids who have been rejected for a variety of reasons that are inside the public schools. So when I say it's charter the answer, from a person who worked in both charter and public schools, I'm going to say no, because charter is not trying to address the one issue that we're talking about, that the system does not like, or the system is designed to make sure that Black children are second-class citizens. They're over-policed and they're undereducated. And those things are also occurring in charter schools. So for me, charter schools are not the answer because we haven't addressed the bigger picture that exists in our society. So then the charter does, what do? They become an additional piece to harm the communities in terms of supporting the Black community that is in harm and that needs help right now. If you don't believe me, go find a charter and you show me where the charters, and I'm talking about the charters that are under the public school system, you show me where those charters are helping all the kids that are in the community, the cross section. I'm talking about the kids that get in trouble, the kids that are straight A students, the kids that have IEPs. It's going to be difficult to find that school because charters, like other places, are trying to show that they're doing well, and test scores are how you show that. And so then people are artificially manipulating test scores through student acceptance. And so, no, we need to hold a bigger conversation, not about charter or public. It's about how do we educate Black kids, period. If we can figure that out, it doesn't make a difference with charter, public, independent, private. We need to educate Black kids. The society hates Black people. That's all I'm trying to say. That's it.
And not only that, right? Not only that, because so trying to second both what Dr. Akua is good to see you, and what Michael was just saying, it's not only we need to educate Black kids, we need to be in control of how our children are being educated. And so that's part of that larger conversation. The institution of education has never worked in our favor because it was never set up that way. You feel me? Like that's just an empirical reality of the situation. So whether we're talking about a private school, we're talking about a public school, we're talking about a charter school, these things are all byproducts of the exact same system that have never operated in a way to center our experience, especially centering an education that's focused on freedom and liberation. Our people have been denied freedom and liberation since day one here in the Western Hemisphere as a result of these settler colonies. You feel me? So a major part of what should be incorporated in our education is how we become free, how we become self-determining, how we become independent in their system, regardless of which way they want to deliver it, via the colonial public education model, via the colonial charter school model or private school model or whatever else, Montessori, whatever they want to put out there. All of those things have operated, produced by the exact same culture, which has been an institution of oppression for our people. You feel me? So charter schools, you might find some examples, and like that's what Dr. Akua was saying, where our people have had more influence over how those charter schools have interacted with our community, and we'll see some successes. So there are ways for us to use that and for it to have some type of positive impact. But sadly, my estimation of it, and I haven't done a thorough research on all charter schools throughout the country, but in my estimation and my examination of it, there are very few examples like that. The charter schools that we see operating in the main, and what Michael was just talking about, like we've seen how charter schools have had an impact. If we have, viewers who are here in the Bay Area, Oakland, San Francisco, parts of the South Bay, those things have operated in ways where they're not being held accountable the same way by the state. They can pick and choose what students they want, taking money away from the other colonial public education model and not serving our students properly because we're not able to hold them accountable or control the way that works. Just like we're not controlling what happens when it comes to the colonial public school system, we're not controlling what happens in the charter model. The important part of that is we need to exercise more control, more influence. So I know somebody says something about a Black PTA. That's cool. I mean, what that really shows is we need to be more organized as a community and exercise our organized power on any institution that has an impact on our people. And then the greatest, in my opinion, the greatest articulation of organized power for a community is them controlling the resources in the institutions that impact their community. So when it comes to the books, when it comes to the curriculum, when it comes to the programs, when it comes to the schools, whatever type of school model we want to adopt, it's a model that we have created. So that's something that we're seeing. There are examples of that, and that's a historical tradition that we come from. But for so many of us, we are dependent on an institution which has never valued us. And they show that in every day in the way that they operate, especially when it comes to the educational institution. And so we have to be strategic with dealing with this present reality. How can we address that and have a positive impact on our young people, because they need that. So we have to be planning for tomorrow, for next week, for next year, for the next couple of years. And that plan should be focused on independent institutions that we control. But we also have to deal with the present reality, which is we got children in charter school, we got children in public school, we got children all over. What can we do with the resources we have now? And that was something that Debra was talking about. We got so many answers, and some of those things are already in play right now. But those things need to become more fixtures in the existing structure as it is now, where we can influence, impact, have control over what's happening when it comes to the education of our young people. And that's where we have to be more strategic and way more creative. And we can do that. You feel me? We're not going to win in their system. We got to do what we can do now for that, and be thinking about how we are more self-determining and independent with the control of our own institutions. Those are my thoughts on that. You feel me? I ain't trying to bias or prejudice anybody else. That's how I get it.
Well, I'm finna get to you. Let me just make one announcement, but I got you up, Will. It's about the equity and inclusion part that we keep coming back around. It's coming full circle. But we at the 3:45. We got 15 minutes left, and this is where I was talking to Tachelle about. I'm sorry. We might go over a little bit. If you guys are okay with it, we could go over. If anybody has to step out and leave, we'll take it with respect. I'll put my information there if you need to contact us or whatever. This conversation is not stopping. We're going to have plenty more conversations here at both sides of the conversation on these topics. But I knew whenever the conversation gets juicy, we always up against the clock. So, so we at that point. But what I want to do is give it to Will, let Will go, and then Tachelle, if you could get Tyson's 2 YouTube videos up. And then we'll get to try to get to these last 2 questions, and let's try to push it through. But go ahead, Brother Will, and then Tachelle, get Tyson's video up.
I apologize for the short delay. Murphy's Law technology had a little faux pas, but I want to give a varying perspective. First, to Brother Tyson's point about charter schools and Brother Essien's charter schools. I work for a charter school here in Detroit metro area. And I work for a school called Distinctive Schools, and we specialize in dealing with folks that are of the cultural inequities. So the charter school almost sometimes gives you the ability to step out of the bureaucracy and to really focus in laser-like on what you want to do and how you want to operate. So when we're thinking about this idea of working with Black kids and supporting Black families, we got to understand, like you said, Tyson, the bureaucracy doesn't always want us to be successful. So sometimes you get that opportunity to have your governing board, to have your governing ethos that allows you to look at and to say, okay, this is what we're doing, and this is how we want to shape our own education. So Dr. Akua, you said the same thing. So sometimes we got to be able to bend with the opportunity and not force it with so much opposition and force, and understand that when we bend the space or we take the confines of different opportunities, that we can get the result that we want. I also wanted to go back to that opportunity where we talked about how do we make our systems work for our young people. We as Black educators have to sometimes be those bridge builders. Sometimes we have to go. There's a brother by the name of Little Dame Somo that wrote the book called Of Water and the Spirit, looking at African ritual. And he talks about going into spaces that are not for us and transforming them by our story and by our presence alone. And so that's what I kind of found myself doing while I was in San Francisco. And again, while I'm here in the Detroit metro area, is being that bridge builder and going in and being able to allow non-whites to see our story and to access it, to understand where we're coming from. And you sometimes find that through relatability. So, and I know Mike Essien talks about it the same way in dealing with his particular issue, is that sometimes you have to have those conversations that people may not be comfortable with, or that you may have to be that educator or present or prepare our children to be in those spaces where they are in white spaces and can share our authentic stories. And I find that you're able to do that by having relatability. So one of the things that we have in having courageous conversations is looking at the idea of stereotype threat. And I like to use it a lot when I'm talking to my non-white partners and helping them to understand what we as African Americans are facing by using the idea of women in mathematics. And so oftentimes when I come at them and say, you're racist or you're doing racist activities, they look at me like, well, I'm not racist. That's not who I am. But when I say, think about this activity, that there was a study that was done at Stanford University where there were a group of women scientists and mathematicians who were proven to be brilliant in mathematics. However, they went into an environment in which it was charged, where they were seen to be that the underlying factor is that you're a woman and you can't be smart. And because of that feeling and that charge, their scores end up fulfilling that prophecy. And that's a lot of what happens with our students and with our kids, that our teachers give them this idea that Dr. Akua and Essien and everyone has said that you're going to be a failure. And then they're doing it and they're not even doing it. They are typically holding up a stereotype, and that they're having their students fulfill that self-fulfilling for prophecy. And so what I've found in my experience is that when I'm able to shake that away and address them not as you're a racist, but that you're doing things in your practices that are implicitly biased, that are upholding racist tendencies. And then when I put in the idea that, think about it, when you're a woman in math and people think that way of you and you end up fulfilling that, you're doing that same thing to our children. So what I found that I've had to do is, in my dashiki, in my Black powerness, is show them through example what their practices and what their implicit biases is doing. And I know Mike is doing the same thing. I sat in a conference with him a couple of weeks ago where we're having those difficult conversations. So as Black people, I'm from Detroit. Detroit is a Black city. 80% Black. I lived in San Francisco for 10 years, was educated in New York. So I've seen a duality and a plurality of experiences as a Black person. And sometimes being an all Black don't work. I'm going to tell you, in Black schools in Detroit, it's all Black. And we deal with the same issues that I dealt with teaching in Tenderloin Community School in San Francisco. And so what it is about opening up the experience. And when we talk about the identity and being able to see the plurality of experience. So when I understand that you as a woman don't want someone to look at you like you're stupid and that you don't have capability. And as a white teacher, when I tell you that you're doing that same thing and how you structure your classroom and how you pick on one kid because they make you feel some kind of way, that's that same opportunity. And so again, we talk about the space of healing and having intentional conversations, real conversations, and being willing to say, to lean into the discomfort. And it ain't always having Black only, because I'm gonna tell you, living in Detroit, 80% Black African Americans, we deal with the same issues. And if not worse, because going to Dr. Akua's point, and he may even see it in Atlanta, we perpetuate our own issues. So when you got a Black superintendent, you got Black teachers, you got Black everybody, but the family don't believe in themselves, and that we feel that we ain't nothing but shiftless Negroes, and we still perpetuate that same thing. So it's about going in that identity and finding out who we are and fixing where we are, and then having intentional open conversations. Sometimes we got to work in white spaces. We do. Sometimes we got to learn how to identify our story and then be able to go in those white people spaces and say, this is what it means to be a human and a Black person and a person that can work in between and maneuver systems. So we got to teach them how to navigate the system as well, in addition to strengthening our own.
Wow,
Ashe.
cannot.
Ashe. It's called code switching. I call it performance. You'll only see me in a dress when I'm in the classroom, because that's what I was told. You know, you're right. Will is a great leader. I followed in his footsteps. So Will, everyone from YCD says hello. Here's a question from a parent, and I have to ask you, how can parents support Black educators in school and community-based organizations? Can we start with the infamous LSIT graduate, Tafara Manning? Can you tell me how you would like parents to support you if you return back to the schools?
I would say I would like parents to help by being more involved, but then that takes me being more involved with the families. And so just being a partner with me and being open to being my partner and, you know, sharing their experiences, me sharing my experience. Like, for example, I teach kindergarten right now, and I have a 5-year-old. So I told my families, like, we're in this together. Like, we have kids the same age, had kids at the same time. So we're doing this together. I'm learning from you. You're learning from me. I'm learning from your students. So just being open to being more involved with their child's education, being more involved in the classroom, within the school, and letting me know what your needs are, you know, and allowing me to support you in that way, or partnering with me to go to the district or go to the administration to get your needs to be met. Like Principal Essien said, it's a community. Like, that's what we need to do. We need to be more student, family, and community centered in order to support our schools. And so that means if there's a lot of families, like, for example, I had a parent who needed to finish her education. And so she had to go back to 5 keys. You know, we talked about she might have needed tutoring. you know, and just getting that type of support for her so she can support herself, she can support her student I'm supporting. Sometimes we have this district and many other districts in this country have wronged these families a long time ago. And so we're seeing the effects of it. So at some point, we're going to have to address that. If we didn't help the parent read, or if the parent had to drop out, or if we made them feel some type of way in the education system, at this point right now, we can fix that. And maybe that parent has to be learning alongside with their student. And so, you know, just being open to getting the help, allowing me to help, and teaching me. So I don't know, just becoming a partner. I'll stop right there and let someone else take it.
I totally agree. Charmaine, same question.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. Like, part of it is that parents don't trust what the teachers say. And like Tafara said, like, that's because of a long history of wronging the families, the students, and even them experiencing their education. And so I want to say, you know, trust the teachers and the administrators that show you that they're invested in their students, but that's a long haul. I don't think that the schools nor the education system have been able to build up that trust yet. But ask questions. I do encourage parents to ask questions. What I don't see often is parents coming in and asking, okay, so what has my child been doing? Just inquiring a little more. It's all about, what is the grades? What is the attendance percentage? Okay, let me yell at my kid and we are out of this parent-teacher conference, you know? And that's the unfortunate part. So I do encourage parents to ask more questions. And also, you know, when you find an adult that is really like investing in a kid, try as much as you can to just believe them, you know, believe that that person is on your side, even though, once again, history has showed that many educators aren't. But try to just believe that some people really do want the best for your kid.
Thank you so much. I love trust, communication. I personally told all my friends and my community, be in their business. What you teaching my kid today? What's the sight words today? What color was your shoes today? I want you to know everything about that teacher. Because when I have John's granddaughter and she's on her way to kindergarten, she can come back and tell me everything. I'm her first teacher. My little cousin, she can read. She got skipped a whole level. So I ask her teacher every morning, did you eat? You okay? I'm in the business, because you're not going to teach my kid Columbus discovered America, because I already told her the Moors did and the Olmecs did. So my advice, be in the business.
I would like to speak.
Okay. Sherry, and then Will.
Hi, yes. Two things I think parents could be well at getting involved with is having family traditions in your home. One thing, you can have a family tradition of everyone sitting together when it's time to eat dinner, no electronics, have a conversation, have what happened in school today, or what do you want to do on the weekend, or what do you want to do on the day off. So start a weekly family tradition. When I was a young girl in elementary school, my dad would have me read the newspaper. Of course, they barely exist today. We have cell phones. But my dad would have me read the newspaper to him at the age of 5. And every time he came home, every day, that would be our family tradition. I would read the newspaper to him. Another one is, if a parents, if you are struggling with helping your child's homework, write a letter. I enjoyed reading letters from parents stating, please help me. I don't know how to teach my child, or I don't understand the lesson. Is it something that you can do extra in order for my child to comprehend? I enjoyed reading those letters, and it gave me a sense of the parent really was involved and wanted that child to do very well in class. And so start traditions and write letters to the teacher, and make sure that your child respects the teacher regardless. Always show respect. Even if the teacher is somehow does not agree with your child, or your child does not agree with the teacher, always speak with respect and show respect. Because that person's character should not have power over the way that you act or react in the classroom. That's it.
All right. Well, Tachelle, I know Will and have got their hand up. I want to get Tyson's video up there.
Okay, we'll definitely put that up. But this one is from the parents. If we don't ask this, John, you can't show your face in the community.
Okay, they hold me accountable.
This is one from the parents. Because John speaks for the community. You know, I read books. Some Black people don't, but I read. John speaks. So forgive me for this question, but the parents, they really want to know. So Will, contribute. What should parents be doing?
I have 2 questions for you, and you might not like what I say. Parents, please give us your real phone numbers. I'm in a school half the time. You guys don't give us your real phone numbers. We try to reach out to you. Now, there's a portion of you that do, but make sure that we can get in contact with you. And those in your community that you have, when you auntie or you got somebody in your neighborhood, take an interest in them. Remember how we used to be? Our family used to be that you had your auntie, your cousin, your sister, everybody in the block was all responsible. And so when Miss Stevens or Miss Watkins didn't step up, Miss Johnson stepped up. So when we talk about that healing space, know who you are, know who you go to school, kids go to school with. When I came up, we had a phone tree. The phone tree had everybody's phone number on it. And so when something was going on, your mama could get in contact, or when you couldn't step up, we became a community thing. We are so isolated. We're so, well, that ain't my problem. That ain't my kid. I ain't got nothing to do with it. And sometimes we need each other's help. Sagrita or Charmaine may not be able to do what she needs to do. So you might, Miss Tachelle, like we do, step up and be in that role. So realize that we a village. Our ancestors, that's how we did it. We was a village. Your auntie, your cousin, your uncle all stepped up where mom and daddy couldn't step in. And the second thing as well is this last year and a half, school happened in your living room. It didn't happen in the building. So when you go in and you don't know what your kid knows, you can't look at me as a teacher and say, well, I don't know what Mr. Parrish is doing, because your kid's school is happening right in your living room. So be engaged, be involved. You know what I teach because it's on the Zoom. It's in your classroom. And as we get ready to go back into the new school year, you now know how I teach. You know my teaching style. My kids' parents, when I'm teaching about growth mindset in my classes, my parents know what's going on because they're able to hear me talk as big as I am in the classroom. And so, again, you as a parent have to be actively involved in your kid. Some of y'all feel like school is a babysitter. And that's what we are looked at as, if we are the babysitter, and that you're not realizing that we're not just a babysitter, but we're an extension of you. So when I call you, even though I've called you 2 or 3 times, and I know you're working. I'm here. I work with you. And I'm working on my white colleagues so that they don't call you as much too. But you got parents that we don't even get your phone number. We get a wrong phone number. We don't have the right information. And then when you do, it's such a confrontational and hostile environment that there's friction. And we're not realizing that we are here for the same reason. So what I'll say to you is we as Black Educator, and I can speak for Essien, I can speak for probably Safari and everybody else. We here, we working for you. And we in those spaces with our colleagues try to get them to see what it is as well. But when you don't answer your phone, and when you come into the building with your rollers in, with an attitude, and don't want to act like you got no sense, you make it real hard for us to step up and to be that advocate. So what I'm saying is give us the pinch of grace, and we're going to give you a pinch of grace, and be focused on the kid at first and have an active role in it. And then we'll start having that support. So show up, show out in the right way. Don't come almost ready to fight me when you ain't even answering your phone, or you're not really realizing your kid got a smart mouth, and you know she do.
And if
can I be quick? I do want to say this. I want to be quick about this. I want to say parents are the expert. Parent or guardians are the expert. More times than not, we think the school is the expert. You are the expert of your child. You live with that child day in and day out. So you are the expert. When your child goes to a new school or has a new teacher, show up and tell that teacher or that school the strengths and areas of growth for your child. Once you give the information, we're responsible and accountable to that. Don't have the school try to figure out your child's strengths and areas of growth. If you know your child has some issues around reading, show up and explain this around reading. That means that the teacher and the school will have to come up with a plan to address the reading. Or if your child responds particular ways around, or if you give commands and they snap back and fight back, but then explain to the teacher, well, this is the best way to communicate to my child. You are the expert. And as long as you realize that you are the expert, you can now hold people accountable once you share that information, because once we have the information, we have to act.
So my question is, how do we do that when we have parents who not involved? They don't know how to pay attention to their kid, right? So I hear you.
That's
I
what we
agree.
I gotta
in,
ask you that too, brother. You ain't asking no hard questions. That ain't no.
But that's what we come
I
in,
just asked because I mean, I hear Brother Will, and I'm glad Will said that. That was very powerful, and our community to hear it, because I go to these schools sometimes, and I see our community. Some of our people come in with bonnets on their head, pajamas, and just raising havoc. So,
All right, but let's
community, we got to do better.
this though. Hold up. Let's not do that though. You feel me? Like, let's be real, and we experience a system that devalues us. Let's not devalue our own people. You know what I'm saying? Whether they show up with rollers in their heads or bonnets or whatever, that don't mean that somebody ain't coming and has a sincere desire to know what's going on with their student. Like, we know how our people come. However our people show up is not the problem. You feel me? Like, that's something that the white supremacist colonial system does. You can't, whether you got on a suit or you got on a dashiki like Will, or your pants is sagging, it don't matter how we show up, it's wrong to them. We shouldn't be trying to perpetuate the same thing. What we do know is real is that when it comes to our community, and sometimes the involvement of our community, parents, guardians, whoever, and that's not there. And sometimes people can respond to something in a way that might be more confrontational than what it should be, but I don't think they're wrong for that, because the school system has never been set up in order to support us properly. So if they're coming with that spirit or that feeling or that essence, it's not wrongfully placed based on the historical experience that we had. But what we should not be doing as educators is perpetuating a false stereotype based on how this system has seen us. We should know how to be able to address and deal with that stuff appropriately, but let's not be singling folks that might come with a bonnet or rollers in their hair or whatever else they might be coming with, you feel me? Because they might be coming with some other type of attitude that we don't think is appropriate in that space. Let's not do that. However our people come, I mean, the fact that they in there in that space, that's important. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's what we're talking about. They're coming in order to try to get some type of information. Like what Will was saying, we might have phone numbers that don't work, emails that don't work if folks want to communicate that way. The fact that somebody is showing up is extremely important in light of the historical experience that we've had in these educational spaces that we have not had control over. So let's not, I understand this is it's a community conversation, you feel me? And we speaking with family, but let's also be real about not trying to perpetuate some of those negative stereotypes with how the thing has seen us in our conversation, because what we want to do is talk about solutions. However our people appear, we need to be there for them because they are a part of our village. And we got folks that look all types of ways, that fit all types of the spectrum of the Black experience. They need to be a part of it. Whoever they are, however they show up, they have an important role to play. You know what I'm saying? So I've heard that a couple of times and I'm just like, all right, I mean, I get it, y'all, it's fun, but let's also be real. Let's not allow that to be a message or a narrative that people gonna take with them. And if that is you feel me, you coming with the bonnet or you coming with the do-rag, you feel me, that's how you come to the spot, then let's be ready in order to really talk about what we need to do in order to support our young people. Community-based organizations, teachers, programs, whatever it is, we all have a role to play. And we need to be more involved in the educational experience of anybody in our community. We got to be more hands-on, you feel me? However our people show up is how they show up. But as educators, you feel me, we can't be, we have to decolonize this. And if I wrote that way, we need to know that, we need to be able to recognize that and address that properly and not pass that off as a stereotype or a trope that has been used historically against our community. You know what I'm saying? I just wanted to speak.
So Tyson, I want to say something.
Wait.
And I respect your perspective, but I'm also going to respectfully disagree because, again, this is part of what's going on in we talking about the problem, but this is what's going on in our community. And as community, we got to have conversations about the real if we really going to make effective change.
He's not saying don't have conversations about the real. What Tyson, because I agree with Tyson, what Tyson is saying is that we must not perpetuate the tropes that the white colonizers are perpetuating against our people. We must not. And I wrote in our private chat that one main reason why all black schools with mostly black teachers are failing is because black folks have been injected with oppression. You know, we're swimming in that same water that Michael Essien was talking about. We're swimming in that too. And so for us to start condemning our people, however, the fact, Mr. Taylor used to, I forgot to tell him about this thing. Mr. James Taylor, who was the principal of the Dr. Martin Luther King Academic Middle School for 17 years in San Francisco, the school that Michael Essien is now under. When Mr. Taylor would have his first year teachers ride the bus from the projects, from the Sunnydale projects, where his kids came from, to King, to see what their kids had to go through to just get to school. So if the kids have grease on their homework assignments, he used to always say that if they had grease on their homework assignments, accept the paper anyway, because you have no idea what those kids had to get, they had to go through just to get to King. So what I'm saying is that I so agree with Tyson that we mustn't become those people who condemn our people as well. We mustn't become those. We mustn't be instruments of the oppressor.
I don't think we're oppressors. I think we're teaching them how to get out of that space. So if I don't teach you how to get out of it, if I let you keep walking in the rollers and letting the oppressor look at you like you an idiot and don't show you that this is like,
who cares how the oppressor look at
to you when we're negated. In order to be able to change this subculture, you have to be able to go up and absorb the subculture. So you have to be able to go in there and show who you are, what you are, and step up and be able to take the reins of it. And if you are consistently passed over because no one's even looking at your message, then you're not even going to step up.
Nah, bro. I mean, I get that he froze up on that, right? Hold on. 1 second. Hold on.
Everybody, hold on 1 second.
I get you, but hold on. I do want to respond to that, right?
So I want to get to the framework, because see, too often we don't.
Are we all on mute? It's technical difficulty.
We all on mute, Brother John. I can't hear you.
Everybody mute your mics for 1 second. Everybody mute your mic for 1 second. All right. So these conversations, this is both sides of the conversation. These conversations get intense sometimes. Again, we have to respect our community standards, and I want everybody to be able to be heard. Okay. You can agree to disagree. That's part of our standard. Your perspective is yours. It's not a prescription. Okay, we are here for your representation yourself, but we also have to represent the community at large. Okay, everybody on here has a great perspective, and I want the community to hear it. Let's not jump over people. Okay, and let's not put each other down because we don't agree. And that's part of why we're trying to have both sides of the conversation. We have to be able to look on both sides of the fence. It's no rights and no wrongs. It's just a perspective. We don't have enough black schools to educate all of our black students yet. So some of our students are still dealing with people that don't look like us. And sometimes the appearance might affect the way that they give us the effective things that they need to help our kids. And again, I have to say this because, again, you know, the question has been answered in the chat several times. Have sometimes our own people become our own oppressors? And we have to be real with these questions, okay? I'm not going to play. I understand you're all professional. My job is to help change this narrative. My job is to have both sides of the conversation, okay? And in our community, there's a lot of things that's affecting us, okay? We have a number of poverty pimps in our community that's taking advantage of our community every day. And if we start this cancel culture stuff, and I see this is sometimes these conversations go there, and I don't agree with the cancel culture because what happens is our voices are being taken away. We have to be able to agree to disagree on things and understand too, if we don't speak up and call out the things that are also wrong, because in our community, we tend to call out everything and everybody else that's oppressing us and doing things to us, but we never want to call out our people, okay? So the accountability starts with us as well. And I see it sometimes in our spiritual realms. We don't want to hold these people accountable, and these poverty pimps come in our community, and they further damage our community. So and we have to call out the truths, and we have to have these conversations. So I'm going to unmute everybody. Micheal was speaking. I want Tyson to go, but let's be respectful. I don't mind us going over. If you got to go, I get it. But I know these conversations get touchy. And that's why it's called both sides of the conversation. Please respect everybody's perspective. You don't have to agree, but let's show respect to each other.
So this is what I'm going to say, that what I find often, especially in our community, we devolve into these arguments back and forth. And what I'm hearing is everybody in the room is for Black people. But somehow we gotten into this argument. And the reason we get into these arguments back and forth is we don't have the framework for understanding and interpreting all the things that are happening, right? And this is why I'm going to go back to this critical race theory. It has 5 tenets, but one of the tenets is like the permanence of racism. Racism, it provides the media stereotype for how we're perceived, right? It says this is, if you see this, then this is bad. If you see that, this is good. So we got into it with the rollers and the slippers, etc. So here's what I want to say. In critical race theory, there's the counter storytelling. And the reason I want to say is counter storytelling. When I was back in school, my aunt showed up at the school with rollers in her hair, with the slippers on and the robe on, right? And if that is still happening now, then that's not an anomaly. That's part of our culture. So then how do we tell the counter story, which doesn't vilify that, but which says when they show up, we look past all of that, because I want to hold a conversation with you around why you're here. If you show up angry, yelling at, like, that's okay too. Come on into my office. People know at my school site. If you got an angry parent, send them to me, because when you're angry, that means you're here trying to do something. So I lean into that too. I look past your anger because you're here advocating for your child. If we use the critical race theory, it allows us to interpret all of the conversations, all of the conflicts that we're having. And I think this is important, especially if our community wants to move forward. So instead of being at each other, we can build in our conversation.
Phenomenal, phenomenal. Go ahead, Brother Tyson.
I appreciate that. Right on for that, Micheal. Bro, like what I've been saying, and what I think a few other folks have been saying, like in the most part, I think a lot of what has been said, there's a lot of similarity in what's being said. However, there are specific points that have been made, and those points, it's important for us to analyze those things critically. How our people show up, there is nothing wrong with how our people show up. You feel me? The thought that there is something that we need to do to change ourselves culturally, that's not correct. We don't need to align ourselves to a norm, a fabricated norm, you feel me, that was set up by white folks in order to advance the supremacy of their culture, especially when it comes to education, because that's the main institution that we've been talking about. We can talk about a whole bunch of other cultural institutions that exist as well, but in education, however our people show up is how our people show up, and they're not wrong for showing up in that way. Like Micheal was saying, if this is something that has existed, it is what it is. And what people as educators need to do, you feel me? And this ain't no educated elite type conversation, but if you are helping to facilitate an educational space, you have to be able to deal with people however they come. And if they come with a certain amount of this or a certain amount of that, it is what it is, fam. We got to deal with that reality. You know what I'm saying? And what I was cautioning us is because out of all the different things that, like, you could have somebody that come with a suit and a nice dress and they still coming with attitude. And we got people that represent that in our social and cultural experience as well. You feel me? And in whatever neighborhood they coming from, they might want to, you know what I'm saying, put on their finest in order to be there for a parent-teacher engagement night. But we ain't highlighting that. And what I was saying, and Debra was also trying to highlight that, it don't matter how we show up when it comes to the way that that institution perceives us. Like, I ain't a fan of the Obama administration and what they did. But you had a person who was melanated in the highest office of the land. It wasn't right to white folks, regardless of how he showed up. You feel me? And then for how we show up, whether we from West Oakland, East Oakland, what parts of the city we from, what parts of the Bay, Detroit, Chicago, Atlanta, it still ain't right. You feel me? So let's not play into that game of trying to say there's a certain way that we should be in a space in order for the space to accept us more. That's not our criterion. We're not trying to be accepted by them. What we're trying to do is to provide the best educational experience possible for our young people. And that's what I thought the conversation was on. You know what I'm saying? So if we're talking about that, then we need to have influence over the curriculum. We need to have influence over the learning space. However, our community members come to the space to show up, if they're being viewed in a negative light or in a light that says you're not appropriate, however you come because of whatever cultural experiences you've had that have formulated who you are in this present day and time, like, come on now. That we ain't here for that. And we ain't trying to change that per se. We're trying to change the educational experience that our young people are having. And we all have a responsibility as community members to be a part of that process. We all don't have the same responsibility, but we have a responsibility. If you are a parent, if you're an elder, if you are just a community member in general, you need to be more involved. You need to know what is in the community with the community-based organizations. You need to know what's happening with the curriculum and do what you can in order to have more of an influence. And then in general, as a community, whether we're talking about the community in San Francisco, Oakland, other parts of the Bay, other parts of the country, as Black people, we need to be more unified in having an impact on what is going on with schooling when it comes to our young people. Those are very clear things that we can do. But for us, perpetuating some of these false narratives and stereotypes, and then some of that is very subjective, meaning based on how you as an individual or I as an individual see somebody else, I might have a certain reaction to that. That doesn't mean that it's true. It doesn't mean that it's true. So let's not get caught up in the subjective. Let's deal with the empirical. Let's deal with the tangible. So if our people are coming to a school space, which is what that was based on, Will said something, John said something as well, you feel me? If we have people who are coming to a school space in order to learn about what's going on, whether they're angry about the situation or they're not, whether they got curlers and bonnets or they don't, you feel me? We have to deal with that tangible empirical reality and then be able to serve them as best as possible. But what has happened historically is our people come, however they come is not right, especially if they look a certain way that folks already against. And then we might be thinking a certain thing about that. Let's not do that in our conversation, especially in what we might be able to do in collaboration with programming or anything else that we might put together. Let's be aware of that, you feel me? And let's be aware of not carrying that stuff forward in what we do. I personally, in my opinion, think that's extremely important. And I felt that we had a couple of things in conversation that happened before that went there, and it was important to call that out. So we're mindful of what we're doing because the goal is how do we serve our community, especially our young people best when it comes to the education that they're going to receive. I think that's extremely important. Let's not miss that.
So, may I address that question?
So real quick,
support?
Yeah, go ahead. Let me just say this real quick, and I appreciate you saying that, Tyson. I agree with you. We have to meet people where they at. I agree with you 100% because every day that's what I do. I work with people that's locked up, different things. I always meet them where they at. But my job as a mentor is make sure that I equip them with the tools to be successful in this society that we live in, right? And if we don't start teaching our young people what is appropriate, what's not appropriate, we're going to keep this gap that's happening, especially in the employment realm. We have to teach our kids. We have to lead, and it comes back to the ethics and our integrity as leaders of the community. It is our job to help change our young people's mind and give them the information that they need to be successful. Because right now, a lot of it's not happening. So I agree with you. We got to meet people where they at, but we also have to start leaning and making this change in the community for our people to be successful. Because again, we're going to have to jump in these different realms.
Hello, Brother John.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, yes. The question is, how can parents support Black educators? Number one, if your child comes to school with a backpack, please make sure that he has supplies in it or she has supplies in it. I don't understand when my students come to the classroom and they want to borrow a pen, borrow a pencil, borrow paper, borrow a notebook, and I ask what's in their backpack and they can't pull it out because they don't bring it. Or they'll pull out a cell phone and that's all that's of value in their backpack. And so I give this lesson to them. I tell them this lesson as I was growing up. After my divorce, I became a single parent. When I took my own 2 children to Target or Walgreens, I made sure that they had all their supplies. I did not ask my own children, what does Sally need today? So I can buy it for Sally. I cannot, as a single parent, I could not be responsible for other person's households. I could only be responsible for mine at the moment. So a pencil may cost 25 cents, a pen may cost 50 cents, but we need to teach our children how to be equipped, how to come to school prepared. Now, also on the other end, teachers, my pet peeve is when teachers give out supplies. When they give out a pencil, when they give out a paper, or when they just have a room full of supplies and the students take the supplies, they break the pencils, they play with it like it's toys. So I've taught students in the classroom, if you want to borrow a supply from your classmate, then get something of collateral, get something of value, so that it's teaching them trading, it's teaching them bartering. Even though they may trust that person, oh yeah, she'll give it back to me, he'll give it back to me. That's not the point. The point is accountability. The point is teaching responsibility. The point is teaching collateral. The point is your parents or your household or whoever takes care of you, make sure that they are taking care of you. They may not be able to afford to take care of another household. So when they buy you supplies, keep it and teach it and make sure it's valuable to you.
I would like to speak. Tyson, I like your brain. I can't see it through your skull, but I am so Afrocentric. I got it tattooed when I got back from Africa. Only kids that can see it are the ones that think like me. When I was given that privilege of working at Willie L. Brown Middle School, my mentor, Marcus, I went across the street and I cried. I cried for 45 minutes because I've never in my life worked in my own community. I've always worked in the suburban community with students, where I would see a boy come in with the African medallions or his dashiki, but he didn't really know what it meant. So I knew that I needed to come back to my community to work. And I didn't fail, right, Ms. Taylor? I didn't fail, but I had to learn to work with my people.
Wonderful.
I'm one of the best educators in Bayview, Tafar is the second. And my training came from women who have lifetime credentials. Lifetime credentials. I don't have a credential because I can't pass those tests. Well, I can't pass one of the tests. All others I passed. But I learned to work with that mother with the bonnet on who was in her bed. But when I flipped up that phone and said, your son is acting crazy, can you come up in here? She bust through the doors. Her bonnet was on because she goes to work in the evening. She's a muni bus driver. And if you're from San Francisco and you have hair, it's going to get fuzzy. So I learned to assimilate with my own people. I no longer try to fit into society because my skin, my nose ring, my whole is going to stand out. And it was recognized among Mayor London Breed, Cheryl Davis, Shaman Walton, like City Hall recognized Tachelle is different. And she's a great Black educator. And with that, I want to work with more Black educators. But before I can do that, I needed to be in a community-based organization. And what that means is, let me drop it in the comments. If parents are unable, let's say your parent was John Henry. John has to be at work at 6 o'clock every morning. He had a daughter in high school, 6 to 2. If he had a parent conference at 12, how is he going to get there? 100% college prep, we have student success coaches that all you got to do is sign a FERPA. We'll come in and speak on your behalf. And we wear purple, we wear afros, we wear locks, we wear our natural hair. Some of us wear weaves. But we speak on behalf of Black parents. So if the parent is not comfortable, then that's okay. Find you a CBO that has a relationship with the school so we can speak on your behalf. My first day on the job, Jackie Cohen taught me the game. She said, I don't have a big vocabulary, so I go to meetings with dictionaries. Come with me. Let me go to this IEP. And not only did Jackie slay the content specialist and the psychologist, when she started flipping through her dictionary, she embedded into me, have no fear. They need us. Our Afrocentric curriculum that came from Kemet to Ghana, everything we do. When Debra presented the African-based educational organization, if I'm butchering it, Debra, I'm sorry. Diane Gray jumped on that. in order to be a great director in a Black community, we need to study what Black people do, what they say, how they behave, what food they like. My students won't eat chicken without hot sauce. We go on Black college tour. They don't know why I'm saying, say yes, sir, no, ma'am. They don't conform to that. So I tell them, while we're in the South, I need you to say these 2 words only. Yes, sir, no, ma'am. And when they do that, they get more honey, shrimps and grits and all the good food to go with it because they know how to speak the vernacular of the South. Then when I bring them back to California, not only do they graduate high school, they go on to college because I'm embedding them with that historical Black college element from the Black Greeks. The grass is greener at a HBCU. Life is better at a HBCU. Charmaine, I hope you heard that. But the way that we have to teach as Black educators, it is not to incorporate our children into society. But when you're in juvenile and you're trying to get a kid out of that system, you got to do what you got to do. You got to do what you got to do. But in our public schools, like you said, Tyson, we need to infuse our curriculum. Every do now, every wall, every rotation I did, it was Afrocentric, Asian centered, whatever kid was in my room. And in the past week, our president has solidified the Armenian genocide. For me, as an ethnic studies teacher, I need to find my first Armenian student to tell her, didn't I tell you somebody human was going to recognize this genocide? She didn't believe it. So if I believe in my culture, the parents are going to believe in my culture. They don't have to come to me perfect. But if they're there and they're screaming and yelling, Essien, you know, Marcus Blackshear said, you were built for this. And I believe him. Debra told me I have a passion and a purpose. I believe them. But I spend many, many nights crying and up thinking, how can I make it better? Behind me is all the books that I ever bought. I still got VHSs of Roots. My kids must see Roots before they go off to school. They must see Queen. They must see Amistad. They have to know their history before they go to a HBCU, because who will send you there? When Harriet prepared for her voyages, she told them what they needed. Better get them hush puppies and cornbread. She took no one unprepared. So people, we need to prepare our students to go back after this pandemic. And the way that you do it, parents, be in the business, find you a CBO, find you a Black person in your community. My hero is my crossing guard. My crossing guard taught me Black history. So whoever it may be in your community, make sure that you tie yourself to that person, see your likeness, and find a mentor.
All right. Anybody else want to jump in there, Tafara? I know you've been waiting to say something.
Yeah, I do want to say something. The pandemic has taught me a lot, and it really, it's some conversations I've had with educators throughout my time in the district about how we can better support our students and our families. But the pandemic made it immediate. And so we've always wanted parent participation. And then with the pandemic, we had to get that. We got the parent participation. So now what I need parents to do is to continue in those roles. And if they haven't been able to participate just a little bit more. But I feel like us as educators and community members, we have to continue these conversations and really start building something that we can have to say, this is how you're going to educate Black students, wherever they are, brown students, wherever they are, Asian students, wherever they are. Okay, like ethnic studies coming in is overdue, but that needs to be first and at the forefront. And letting students know, whoever the students you have in your classroom, who they are, and having them take that reality from who they are, their history, who they are as in America right now with their family, and bringing that into the classroom, honoring that, sharing that with the students within the classroom. But we as Black educators have to really take the time to build something to say, this is how we are going to educate students going forward. Parents have had to reconnect with the fact that they're the first teachers. So we have to build on that and really become their partners. And so we can't keep them out of the conversation. The CBOs, they're right there. I think we have to honor and respect paraeducators' voices. Sometimes they're the most senior person at the school, if their school has had a lot of transition, and oftentimes not the people that are consulted. They know the family stories a lot of time. They have the real numbers a lot of the times, but we're not seeking that information from them except for when we really need it. So we really have to start, and it takes the Black educators in the community to say that's what we want to happen, and making the leaders within the district honor that. So I feel like we have to keep these conversations going, put some stuff on paper, bring it to the board, and just put it into action.
John Henry, I have to leave. I'm sorry. We're 35 minutes past, and thank you for being such a gracious host tonight. But I just didn't want to just drop off the screen, and it just seems rude. But I do have to leave. I have another commitment. I purposely dropped a lot of books in the chat, and thank you for sharing that list, because like Tyson, I came on here wanting to deliver tangible ideas of what we can do to transform schools. And the reason I asked Tyson to share about just one thing that he's done in one school district in the Bay Area. It happens to be the largest high school district in all of Northern California. And so for that superintendent to embrace his curricular reform that he's doing, to me, that's a big deal, and it deserved a platform like this one. Both sides of the conversation. So I want to thank Tachelle for inviting me. Thank you, John Henry, for being such a great host. I love your logo. I love what you're trying to do here by allowing both sides of the conversation to take place. And even when we disagree, we don't have to be disagreeable. I want to thank Michael Essien for coming on when I asked him to. And by the way, shameless plug, both Michael Essien and Tyson Amir are now members of ABEN's, Black Education Network's board of directors. They are members of our board of directors. I'm very proud of that. And I'm going to make sure that I share our upcoming webinar that's free this Thursday. Toby Scruggs is talking about trauma and school reopenings from a African-centered perspective, though. Like, what do Black parents need to pay attention to as schools are reopening around the country, and trauma, and that's impacted our children. And then we have our Summer Institute. I'm happy to say that Diane Gray, in her brilliance, and Tachelle, in her insistence, were the first team from around the country to sign up for the Institute. And they paid full price. They weren't asking for a shortcut, a discount. They paid full price. So again, Tafara, was great to see you again. And nice to meet the other new people here, and just have a good evening, everybody. But I've got to get ready for another.
Thank you very much for coming out and showing out today. We appreciate the wisdom and knowledge and your service. Looking forward to this conversation continuing. I mean, this is not going to stop. We're going to continue these conversations, and looking forward to having you back soon. Thank you for coming on today.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
So that final question, I put it up when Debra left. Tyson, I would love to show your video. I mean, I was ready at 1 o'clock for this stuff. What do you do now as a Black educator pre-pandemic and during the pandemic? May I show your videos now?
Oh yeah, feel free. I was getting ready to say I got to jump off too, but you can use that if you want to. Out of the 2 videos, I would recommend the 4-bar breakdown one. That's an example of a curriculum that's being used in schools right now. So when we're talking about, one of the points I was making is being in control of our curriculum and how that gets into spaces. This is, so not just talking about it, trying to create something and then getting that out there so folks can be exposed to it or have access to it. But I apologize, I'm gonna have to jump off. I look forward to following up with y'all. Thank you again for the invitation to me to be a part of this. It was great being here with you all, and let's keep serving our community.
Yes, brother. Thank you for coming on, Tyson. I know you got to go. Appreciate you. Looking forward to doing some work with you in the future as we continue to impact our community intentionally. Love the curriculum and things that you're doing for our community. Very powerful stuff. And looking forward to those further conversations, good brother.
All right, so I'll play it now.
Greetings and peace.
Welcome to the 4-bar breakdown. In this session, we're going to be breaking down the first 4 bars from the song Black Mirror by Tyson on beats. Hope y'all ready? All right, the reason why I wrote the song Black Mirror was because it's so important for us to have an authentic understanding of the history that we come from, especially our revolutionary history. And what is a true aspect of our experience is when it comes to our revolutionary history, that stuff has been taught to us from the lens of the colonizer. We don't have a real understanding of who we are, and we don't have a real understanding of our revolutionary history. I wanted to speak to that, and so I chose Black Mirror as an opportunity to bring that to the forefront. Let's go ahead, let's begin. So in the first 4 bars, I say, the situation is systemic. Every injury that they've inflicted has been intended. Through the colonies and Constitution, they engineered and invented multiple ways to keep us forcibly enslaved and hold us indentured. So I start with, the situation is systemic. Huey P. Newton said, knowing how to struggle is the essence of winning. Recognizing ills is fundamental. Recognizing how to overcome those ills is mandatory. In order for us to be successful, we have to know what we're up against. And so in that first line, the situation is systemic. What we're dealing with is a system. We're dealing with institution. We're dealing with stuff that is centuries old. This is not some one-to-one or one-on-one person versus person. No, this is much deeper than that. We're talking about things that are deeply embedded in the fabric and in the core of this society. We're talking about the economic system. We're talking about the governmental system. We're talking about all these systems operating hand in hand in order to create the conditions that we see before us. And if we want to be serious about being successful, we have to know what we're up against in order to create strategies and tactics that we can implement that are going to manifest in true revolutionary change. So we have to begin there. Recognizing how to overcome those ills is mandatory. So knowing what we're up against is key. The situation is systemic. And then figuring out the strategies and tactics that we want to implement in order to change that system, that's where we have to be creative, and that's where we have to get active. I wanted to start the song with that because I want us to know what we're up against. So the situation is systemic. Every injury that they've inflicted has been intended. Because, building on the first line, the momentum from the first line, because this is a system that we're up against, it has been designed a specific way. All the things that are happening, it's not by chance, it's not happenstance. These are intentional things. So if we look at what transpired from colonial era up until this constitutional era that we find ourselves in here in the United States, it was intentional. Who has been included, who has been excluded. The fact that slavery or the institution of forced enslavement was legal in all 13 colonies, that's a reality of the situation. Then, of course, going from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution, one of the first things that they had to settle when they were building the Constitution was what to do with the institution of forced enslavement. And of course, they legalized it. And they legalized it in a way where they define Black folks as 3/5 of a human being, and that's Article 1, Section 2. Every injury that they've inflicted has been intended. So if we move forward in the timeline from that time, we can go to the Dred Scott case, 1857, where you have the Supreme Court Justice Roger B. Taney speaking about the Black man has no rights that the white man is bound to respect. Every injury that they've inflicted has been intended. We can go into the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. We can go into Jim Crow. We can go into the 20th century, into the 21st century. None of this is by accident. And then if we begin looking at the experience of our indigenous brothers and sisters, it's the same thing. None of this is by accident. Every injury that they've inflicted has been intended. Through the colonies and Constitution, they engineered and invented multiple ways to keep us forcibly enslaved and hold us indentured. It's a fact that in the entire history of the British colonial project that eventually became the United States of America, slavery has never been illegal. This is not a place where freedom is guaranteed to everybody. It's not. So who are the people who have been impacted the most by their institution of forced enslavement? Us. They want to tell us freedom and liberty for the people. Nah, it's not a reality. Every colony allows slavery to be legal. And up until this point in time, although the 13th Amendment is something that people speak about, we know that in the 13th Amendment it says The institution of slavery is gone except if you have been duly convicted of a crime. And so then that leads to what many want to call the prison industrial complex. We have millions of brothers and sisters locked up to this very day. And who are the majority of those people in the jails and the prisons of the United States? Black folks. Slavery has never been illegal in the United States. And it won't unless we as a people rise up and create conditions that will result in change. And that change will result in a society that's truly about the freedom and the liberation of the people. So let's run it back from the top. The situation is systemic. Every injury that they've inflicted has been intended. Through the colonies and Constitution, they engineered and invented multiple ways to keep us forcibly enslaved and hold us indentured. Those are the first 4 bars of Black Mirror. Let's meditate, let's reflect on that. Let's be inspired by the revolutionary power in the bars, and let's get out there and let's get active. Power to the people. I'll see y'all next time for the next session of the 4-bar breakdown.
All power to the people. All power to the people.
Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I know tomorrow is some of your first day back on the job. And I just want to tell you that I don't know what to say other than do what God created you to do. And if you need help, 100% College Prep is open Monday through Friday as a community learning center. And when schools open back up, Principal Essien, my intent is to keep putting those Pan-African flags in the class. If any Asian student want to learn where they came from, let's go on a field trip to Angel Island. I'm an ethnic studies teacher, but I'm 100% Black, proud. I don't know what else to say. This is I am me. And the staff at 100% College Prep with the student success coaches, John mentorship, along with the Dr. Marshall, Omega Live and Free, we have an Afrocentric philosophy. Black Wall Street is 3rd Street all the way to City Hall, then around to Lakeview, 1 San Francisco. We got one shot to rebuild education. And we got the books, we got the brains. Tafara and I, we hold them privileges, we hold them privileges Dr. Flower has instilled in us. And if it requires me to get fully vaccinated to do what God lets me do, so be it. I'm going to put my culture to the side and go ahead and do what is right for our children. I pray, Tafara, that you come back. Ms. Taylor, I pray that you come back. Mr. Essien, I pray that you have Black men in your school to help you do what you do and listen to that wonderful jazz music in the hall. The colors in the back of your school, people thought it was the rainbow. I knew exactly what it was. Color, cognitive development. I pray for all teachers, all students, and everyone listening. We are the people. We have built our schools. We have a 10-point plan, and we still have Black Panthers on this land. And if we have to go to Tanzania to learn how it's done by some real Black Panthers, let's go. John, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity on both sides of the conversation, going over 48 minutes. You was right. I was wrong.
It's okay. I'm telling you, I do this. I know where these conversations go, and I know there's trigger points. But before we let everybody go, I know y'all been holding on, and thank you all graciously for hanging in. Typically, we don't go this long, but this is very impactful to our community. And I just want to thank you all because the words that you spoke, I hope community gets it. I hope our elected officials get it. I hope our leadership and our organizations get it. Understand, our Black educators gave you an experience that they're dealing with every day, and we need to support each other. But before I leave, I want to let everyone give some closing words. Brother Epsons, if you could leave us with something, leave community with something, and then we could just go down the line to each one of you sisters. Just give some love back to our community and leave them with some gems before you guys step out today.
Gems, there's nothing wrong with our community. You are perfect as you are. So wherever you go, never apologize for who you are, how you show up, because you are beautiful in your Blackness and your essence. And what I will say is, may social justice and equity empower us to speak and act. Thank you.
Phenomenal. Very powerful. Ms. Taylor, you want to go next?
Sure. A couple of things. Number one, Tachelle was nicknamed at Willie Brown Middle School by a few of us as Angela Davis. So we really enjoyed her teaching, and she was very valuable. And Brother John, I wholeheartedly understand where you were coming from about the presentation of the parents coming into the school with rollers in their hair. Although we may understand where they're coming from, but if a teacher of another persuasion see them like that, they don't see their heart, they don't see their soul, they just see their physical being. So I very much understand where you were coming from. And I'd like to leave this panel with these words. Words are very powerful. So we should teach our children when they speak, they should speak into positive affirmations and not negative. For faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. Hebrews 11:1. Thank you.
Wow, powerful. Thank you, sister, for coming on. I needed that. That was dope there. Mr. Farr, you want to go ahead and leave your last words to the community?
Yes, I want to thank you all for this space. I want to thank all the panelists for giving their words of wisdom and inspiration. And I want to tell everyone, don't let the four walls fool you. Education happens everywhere, all the time, anytime. It's about what you want to learn. Let's go out to the community and make our schools what we want them to be, but let's not let it be limited to the four walls, and let's get educated anywhere, anytime, in the homes, in the churches, in the streets, on YouTube. However, education is everywhere.
Wow, phenomenal. All power to the people. That's what we needed to hear from you all today. Just want to say thank you. My thing here at both sides of the conversation, I always say leadership. To be a leader, you have to demonstrate what's possible. You educators came here today and you just really let community know by your demonstration. And again, leadership is everything. And we need our community organizations, our teachers, our fire people, everyone to take the accountability and be leaders and lead by example, lead with integrity, lead with ethics, because again, our young people are watching and the things that we do impact them as well on their journey of learning and being educated. So let's lead by example and let's just work together. And as our mayor always say, just do the work. And I appreciate you all for doing the work because this work is tireless. It is never enough praise and understanding and pay for this work that we do for community, but it's important that we continue to do it. So just want to say thank you. With that being said, everybody, this Tuesday, we'll have another Hidden Gem segment. Every Tuesday, we highlight our Black and brown businesses. We give them an opportunity to come on our platform to promote their business, their hours, locations, what they're doing, so community know where our Black and brown businesses are, so that we can make sure that we give them the economic impact that they need and patronize those businesses. So that's what our our Hidden Gem show is every Tuesday, as well as we highlight individuals like these phenomenal educators that were on here today. We bring these type of people on there to highlight them, get them their flowers, give them their roses, and let them know that community appreciate the work that they all do. And that's what that segment is about. And then this Thursday, I know the topic came up by Ms. Taylor today. Financial literacy is very important for our community. This Thursday, we have a phenomenal sister that's going to come on and teach another segment of financial literacy, how to impact our community, how to look at other ways to leverage and make sure that we leave generational wealth to our young people and our families. So I'm looking forward to that segment. And then next Sunday, we're going to have another Sunday conversation. We are leading into our Latin AAPI conversations as we go in there. This Sunday coming up, we're going to be talking about mental health. We're going to have a bunch of mental health providers come on. We're going to have some from our Latin community as well to come talk about this thing that we call mental health. What is the issues? How do we fix it? And how do we get community resources and make mental health cool so that all of our people can go get help and live a great life and not dealing with the mental health issues that take place in our community. So with that being said, thank you all for joining on. I know it's long. I'm getting a lot of text messages. We are wrapping up. Thank you guys for the support. Continue to donate to both sides of the conversation. As you guys understand, it takes donation and community to get behind each other, to keep our platform, to keep our message. As I told Tachelle today, we'll be the new Black TED Talk at some point in the future. So we just have to continue to support each other. And we want to make sure that our voices are being heard because, again, at both sides of the conversation, we are here changing the narrative. Whether you think it's positive or negative, we're going to make sure that our voices are being heard and the stories are being told from our people, like you all saw today from our Black educators. Thank you all again for coming on. We will see you guys this Tuesday. Have a blessed evening. Be safe and show love to everybody that you encounter.